All right, I just went live too. So I think I probably have to close
I'm live, baby.
lots of things. Probably going to hear myself talking in 2 seconds, but
Oh yeah, I gotta do the same
cool.
thing.
All right. Hey, everybody. So I think we are live now. Looks like there's a lot of people on here with Charles. As soon as Charles talks,
Hey
it'll show
guys.
up.
Hopefully I'll pop up soon. What's going on?
One day I will figure out how to do this side-by-side streaming stuff so we can actually show up side-by-side in Zoom. We're going to be doing a lot of desktop sharing today, though, so it probably won't matter too much. But the plan today was to, we'll do a couple things. First, answer a bunch of questions. If you guys have questions just about general Unity stuff, game development stuff that we can answer. And then we're going to build out a little game. So take a mobile game, build a clone of it, go from a completely empty project. We'll go through the process of throwing it together, building it, show all the kind of problems and issues that come up and the things that we stumble with. And then after it's done, we'll do another version of it where it's like the nice, completely edited, clean version. So kind of like what you normally see in a YouTube tutorial. And then right now we're going to do the live behind the scenes version of it first. So you can see that all, see it all kind of come together. And yeah, know that it's not always just magic, right? It's not just like you do it and you always know the right thing. The first thing that you do works perfect. So that won't be what you'll see today, but we'll be taking questions and stuff. And then, like I said, the full version or the edited version will be available. So if you just want to do the step-by-step and not see all of the problems, you'll be able to do that as well. Anyway, I think, Charles, you're live streaming too, right?
Yes,
So
I am.
if you're on my channel watching, make sure you subscribe to Charles' stuff. He's got lots of great content there. And before we get going, if you don't mind just hitting the like button and the share and all that stuff, it does help just get more people in here and let more people see what's going on and hopefully make people better game developers. Sorry, I'm like looking off to the side, but that's where all my chat is. It's kind of over there. Oh, and there's my knight. He's almost ready, by the way. So let's see. You want to kick off with questions, dude, or
Sure. I mean, I don't
see if we have a couple questions real quick? Maybe do like 5 minutes of questions, and then we'll get into actually building the game.
Sure. I see a question on your side. Oh, look, someone says, "Can you link Charles's channel?" Let me do that.
I think Charles can do that right now.
I'll do that. That's the first question I'm going to answer. Yes, I can.
And then somebody asked about using scriptable objects as humble objects. Have you done that before?
I have not run into that use case. So I'm trying to figure out how to link this, but using scriptable objects as humble objects. No, but I mean, I don't see why you couldn't.
Yeah, I haven't done it myself either, so I'm kind of curious what that would look like. I have a couple ideas, but I have a feeling I'm picturing it wrong in my head.
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a weird way to, I guess, word it. Like you could have, like, they're almost like they're mutually exclusive ideas. Like you could have a scriptable object, and if you delegate enough to it and run unit tests or write unit tests for the scriptable object, then I guess technically it's the humble object pattern.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm just not sure what the use is. I think you're probably in that same boat, trying to figure out exactly what the use case is. I don't see. Let's see. A couple other questions. So ever mind going over ability effect system like you could find in an RPG? I would definitely love to do that. I built a bunch of them. They're really complicated though, so it's something I don't think I do in a live stream, but I might make a video on that. Just and the whole idea is like making a system so that you can build out abilities or combat things that have multiple different effects and lots of things going on. It doesn't make sense for most games, to be honest. Like if you're building a first person shooter or a strategy game or basically anything that's not like a fantasy RPG with tons and tons of spells, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. But if you're building something like that, you need a really complex system for that so that you can kind of combine and create all that data and have it control your game. But yeah, I'll definitely do that. I'll do like a super complicated one. I think it'd be fun. And I've built many of them in the past, and it's been a lot of fun, gotten a lot better at it. So I think I'd love to do that.
I always find that those types of things are kind of hard to write a tutorial for or create a tutorial for because they really are specific to the game, like even as something as simple you would think as an inventory, maybe simple is the wrong word, something that you think could be genericized like an inventory system. it's like, I mean, the inventory system for World of Warcraft is dramatically different from the inventory system for something like Minecraft. Conceptually, it's like, yeah, I get an item, I put it in my bag, but how do you represent items? Are those items equipable? Are they usable? There's just so many different things that it's very hard to create one tutorial for all cases. By the way, someone was mentioning that my microphone was low. I turned it up. Let me know in the chat if I need to keep raising the volume.
Yeah, I think you're totally right on that too. Like the inventory systems, I've been trying to build something similar recently, and getting it super generic, I think it's almost futile, right? Like it's not gonna work in your game generic. You're gonna need to customize it. So having a generic system to start can be okay, but it's usually gonna, I think, shove you into problems. But it's a good thing to learn how to build, and I think build a couple of them and see what it's like and see what the problems are. It's like I said, they come out totally different. You could have slots with slot numbers. You could have space and slot size where they take up a certain amount of area in a bag, and you have to arrange them.
Stacking,
have unlimited inventory is like,
yeah, things like that. I'm actually building that's why I brought it up, because I'm building an inventory right now, specifically using the whole scriptable object workflow that Ryan Hipple, that famous Ryan Hipple talk. Yeah. So I'm building one now, and I'm like using only that workflow, scriptable objects, value objects, and like game events, the way he uses them, runtime collections. It's really cool, and it's kind of like, again, mutually exclusive. Like the type of inventory I'm building, I just happen to be modeling it after World of Warcraft, because I've put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours into that game, so I know that inventory inside and out. But then I was thinking like, well, some of the problems I'm trying to solve for this probably don't even come up in a bunch of other games.
Yeah, they don't in most games, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely in most games.
Huh. Cool. You have to share that when you're done with it, dude. Is
Yeah,
it for a project or?
That's for fun. Maybe if we get some time, I can pull it up.
Yeah, that would be cool. I think that'd be a fun use time. People might be interested. If you guys are interested in seeing that, just mention in the comments. We can jump to it quicker. Somebody else asked, do you have good uses for partial classes in Unity? No, not really. I think partial classes are the devil. They're evil. They were created for the sole intention of making WinForms hackable with with designers, so the designer code could create stuff and not break your code. Partial classes really just hide big classes. It's really just a way to take a big giant class and pretend that it's not big. I mean, it does. I'll be honest, it does make it a little bit easier because you can segment your code a tiny bit, but it's worse than just using regions, I think, because it really hides the complexity and it hides how big things are. It also makes it really hard to know why something is working that you're not expecting to work, because you can't find it in the class. And then you find out that there's this little partial declaration of it somewhere else that's handling that one little part or something.
Yeah, I mean, the only use case personally that I've ever found it acceptable is when you have some part of your framework or engine you're using generating code, and you want to be able to edit that class that it generates, in a safe way, because generated classes obviously will get regenerated over on and you'll lose anything you edit. So yeah, and I think WinForms is like, that's the scenario. It generates a WinForms class, you can edit the partial, and it can keep generating over and over as you edit the UI, but you won't affect your proprietary code.
Yeah, it tends to be a mess. It's much better if you can keep the file small. Like if you get to the point where you're thinking, hey, I want to make these partial, there are definitely better options and things that you could do. You could look at just ways to refactor and separate that out. Think about how these could actually be separate classes, because that class is probably doing way too much. It's probably a little overcomplicated. Let's see, what other things do we have? Can we learn to publish a game on Google Play step by step? I'm not sure where a good place for that is now. It's been a little while since I published a game out on Google Play. I don't know if you've got any advice on that, Charles.
I do not. I haven't really messed around with that, to be honest.
It was pretty straightforward though, just going through the Google. I think I just used Google Docs last time, just stepping through them. It wasn't anything too complicated. You build out the APK, submit it with all the metadata. The hardest part for me, I think, was getting the art in the right sizes.
Yeah,
Because
it's
I'm not an
always
artist. But yeah, I think they have pretty good documentation on it. It was a lot harder getting on iOS. Just the documentation and the steps were kind of a pain, but I think that that must have changed by now.
I always find with those things that it's like you'll learn it, and then when's the next time you publish a game? You know, maybe a year if you're lucky. You know, if you're really, or all right, maybe a couple months if you're really working hard. And by that time, things have changed. You know, there's certain pain points that are always going to be pain points. My suggestion would be if you're ready to publish the game, you know, start doing the research and figuring out what makes sense for you. You know, I think Jason in my chat said that there was a Udemy course or Skillshare courses, but yeah, it's just not something that unless you work for a company and that's your job, like having that knowledge, it's it's like a one-off.
Yeah, it's not something you do often. It's just like Steam deploying. Like I used to remember that, back of my hand, but I haven't pushed out a build to Steam in a while, so I don't remember anymore. But it's
Yeah.
easy to go back and learn.
Yeah,
Right, let's see a couple other questions, and we'll get on to building the game. So let's see. Hi, is C# good for input handling in building games like Sims and Planet? Or C# events good for input handling in games like Sims or Planet Coaster? Yeah, I mean C# events tend to be a good way to handle input and responding to actions or things that have happened. Right. I use events a lot. It's very easy to get overcomplicated with events. If you have events that are triggering other events that are triggering other events, it's going to get hard to follow the flow of the code. But events tend to be a good way to make it so that you can register for things in unrelated systems and get callbacks and updates on stuff like that. Try not to use them inside the same class or the same system as often, though, because that's when it tends to get overcomplicated for me. I don't know how often you use events, Charles.
I mean, I use them when I need them, and sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's sparsely. I think my biggest suggestion would be if you're using events because they can get complicated, is to log a lot, log everything. And you know, sometimes you log. It seems like you log too much, so you want to, I guess, do anything you can to mitigate scrolling blindness. You know, by having too many logs that look the same. But yeah, no, logging is key when it comes to all these events because you just need to be able to follow, and it's very hard to follow along something if you just have no information to work with.
Yeah, it certainly can be a pain. It is nice though when you look at the debug log in your console, you'll be able to see the call stack of those events a lot of the time and see exactly where things came from. But the problem I run into too is like events that accidentally are triggering themselves or triggering another event that triggers the first one, and you end up with a weird infinite loop and Unity crashes. I've had that happen a couple times. One of them was semi-recent where it was a side effect of naming variables too close to each other. So called one event, meant to call the other one, and it was just calling the same one over and over in a loop. And yeah, blows up the editor, everything crashes, and it sucks. But eventually you catch it after like the third time, like, why does it keep crashing? Oh shit, my code's bad.
Yep.
See, what other things we got? How to make a complex UI for shop missions and manage all the stuff in there that might update from one thing in the game to somewhere else, like Subway Surfer. Oh, this is a good question. I think this is more about separation than anything, right? So if you have a complex UI that's managing the stuff, you really don't want the UI to have much, if any, state or control of or knowledge of the state. You want to bind it up to the data that's actually kind of controlling your game. So if you have your, whatever your missions list stuff, it should be pulling from mission list data that's the same data that your game is using, and then using that to display it. Same with like coins or anything else. Like all of that stuff, there shouldn't really be much logic in the UI other than selecting things, what's available, and that's about it. And then the other code that's shared should be handling all of what that data is and how it reacts to those things and how it does callbacks.
Yep.
Oh, Jason said something interesting, huh? Oh, log each event as it comes. Yep. Jason's on board with logging stuff.
He made a good point about having like an event dispatcher. That way you have one place where you route your events through.
Oh, yeah. That'll work great.
Makes it easier to follow. But, it's like, anything in development, readability, being able to have someone else look at your code base and have a good idea of what's going on. And I think events, I struggle with that because events really do kind of hide a lot of what's going on. and you really do have to follow things.
Yeah.
Yeah, could be a pain
It
in the
certainly
butt.
can make it harder to follow, right?
Mhm.
But if it's done right and cleanly, I think a lot of times it'll simplify and make things easier to understand. If the events are set up right and the hooks are good. Because it's a lot easier to have like a data system that has a UI that's just listening to callbacks on something changing than it knowing about the UI and trying to call into the UI and all and like your data related systems calling into all these other things. They really shouldn't. They should just be exposing when things change or when things happen that other things need to know about.
Right.
Okay. Couple more questions. Can you do fixed split windows instead of switching to them? I would love to, Martin, but I have not figured out how the hell to get that to work in Zoom.
I think we can work on that this week.
Yeah, the docs that I found mentioned a bunch of buttons that I don't have, and I don't know why. So I don't know if they just haven't updated them or if I'm blind, which is probably the more likely option. Right?
Maybe I can design some fancy like side by side. We can put it in OBS or something.
Well, there's like a 4x4 mode, and that's like normally there by default. When I talk to people, it's fine. Whenever I hit the stream button, it like disappears. I don't know why. And maybe it's the type of meeting. I'm not sure. We'll figure it out for the next one though. But yeah, it would be nice to just be 4x4 or whatever, and then have the desktop going to at the same time. Not a coder, but I want to make Unity games. How should I start? Learning C# separate from Unity, and after that learn Unity, or can I start with Unity directly? That's all you, Charles.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that question?
He wants to know if you should start learning Unity or C# outside of Unity and then learn Unity, or jump straight to Unity and C#.
Well, I mean, it couldn't hurt to learn C#. Because a lot of it really depends. I wouldn't say there's one right path. I mean, yeah, if you learn C# first, I mean, look, if your goal is you want to make games for fun and you just want to get into it and you've got some ideas and you don't work for a company, you're not trying to find a job, you could probably take a hybrid approach, get Unity, try to play with it, then learn a little bit of C#, try to answer questions to fill in gaps as you learn Unity. Because learning Unity means when you learn Unity, you're learning a tool. You know what I mean? It's like an artist learning Photoshop. You say, oh, should I learn Photoshop or should I learn, color theory first? Well, I mean, what are you trying to do? So if you're just trying to learn programming and programming fundamentals and you've never programmed in your life, that's probably a healthy place to start. But
he wants to make games.
If you want to make games in particular, I mean, yeah, I would say learn some Unity, because if your goal is just to make games, you're definitely going to want to learn programming, but you could theoretically pick up like a visual scripting tool, or maybe if your game is, simple enough, you could pick up some framework like, I don't really use any of them, but there's like this one Game Maker, I think is what it's called.
Playmaker, Bolt, a couple others. Yeah, I would. Yeah,
you can get pretty far with those.
You can. I think he sounds like he wants to learn to. Well, it says I'm not a coder and I want to learn to make games. So yeah, that is an option definitely. If you don't want to learn how to code, you can go with the visual stuff. If you do want to learn how to code, though, I would say yeah, just get into Unity, start building games. The one downside to going out and learning more academic C# or like web-based stuff or Windows tools that you would build in C# is that you're going to learn some things that are great patterns outside of game development that don't work well at all in game development. And you're going to probably focus on a couple things that are very different. Like if you're building web stuff, you don't really think about garbage allocation. If you're building a game, garbage allocation is a big deal. It's not a big deal when you start out, but you can get into the pattern of not even thinking about it when you're doing web stuff. And there are a lot of just, I think, patterns like that really don't apply to game development, that it's easy to learn and kind of fall into. And it's also easy to try to I found that a lot of people that know C#, they'll try to figure out how to do things that are already done in Unity because they didn't start with Unity. So they don't know that a lot of systems exist, and they try to rebuild the systems with the knowledge that they have of C#. So I would, yeah, probably just start building games, go through some simple tutorials, and then mix in some code tutorials too. Maybe grab a Pluralsight course on C#, but I wouldn't do that first. Jump into Unity, build a little bit, get familiar with it, and then start wondering what things are. Wonder what the word class means. Why is it there? What the hell is it? Go look it up and start figuring that out, and then go on to why is this public? What does that mean? And start watching a bunch of videos on those as you come across problems. I find it easier to retain if I'm working on a problem and finding the solution than if I'm just looking at a bunch of information that I'm not actually able to use. And building games makes it easy because you can use it, share it, and show everybody the thing that you built with it.
That's right. I agree.
Okay. I'll take another question, but I'm also gonna ask everybody to hit the like button one more time because we're only at 30. There's 130 people watching.
I'm only at 10. Come on.
Either they don't like it, or maybe we just need to get on to talking about game stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Declaring events in an interface, is that an anti-pattern? No, I do that. I occasionally declare events in interfaces. Not common, but I definitely do it. I don't know about you. Do you ever put in events in interfaces?
I honestly can't think of a single time I've done that, but an anti-pattern? I don't.
You think about like notify property changed.
Yeah, oh, true. Okay.
I notify property changes, and I do things like that where I'll have events that have some sort of a callback that's in a, or interfaces that have some sort of event that's callback.
Yeah.
Not super common though, not like hundreds of them throughout the project, but I can think of 2 or 3 in one project right now. Let's see.
I saw a question on the chat, but it looks like Jason answered it.
Oh, good. About component, it looks like about UI stuff, right? Separating canvases out
and async await versus like coroutines and stuff. But yeah, what he said. It's good.
Can you make something like Age of Empires in Unity? You definitely could. In fact, one day I probably will build an RTS game when I get bored. I mean, when I get enough time to do it, because I'd really love to make like a new Command and Conquer Generals that's like 1,000 players or something. I don't know. I got like a million RTS ideas. Yeah, it's definitely possible though. You could do that. You can make an RTS in just about anything. It just takes time and networking experience and a lot of discipline, I guess. Anything else for questions, or I think you want to get off to building something?
Let's do it. Let's build something.
So we were talking about building out a game. Oh, you know what? I wrote out in my notebook. Let me see the name of that game, if I can find it. Okay, so I wrote in another notebook the name of that game.
Let's see if it's in my notebook.
Well, no, this is the problem that I have, right? Like, I like to write things down in notebooks, but then when I can't find a notebook, I just grab another one.
Dude, I wouldn't know what I would do if I didn't have a notebook next to me at all times.
I'm constantly grabbing out new ones, and I just lose it. Which one I'm in? So let's see. Did I write down the name of the game that I wanted to build?
Well, while he looks for that, here's a book I'll recommend to everyone. It's called Starting to Unit Test: Not as Hard as You Think by Eric Dietrich. Eric Dietrich is a really good blogger. Check out his blog, and his book is really good. And it's very light, so you could probably get through this in like, I mean, if you read it, you can do it in one sitting. I would think it's only 100. It's less than 100 pages, and there's not really I mean, it's not really heavy. So I don't know. Recommendation for you. Game.
What's it called?
It's called Starting to Unit Test: Not as Hard as You Think by Eric Dietrich. Yeah,
and it's not. I like the title because I think people think that unit testing is hard, and it's because in reality, unit testing is hard if you try to just slap it into your existing project. It's nearly impossible, and it's a nightmare. And I don't know if you've ever tried to do that, like take a 3-year-old project and slap unit tests on it. Even like a web project, it's not an easy thing to do. So it's
very hard.
But if you're starting out new, it's easy. If you start out with a clean project, and it'll make things just better in general. So I found the game. It was called Fill the Line. I'm gonna just post a link in chat and show like the example. And unless anybody has a much better idea, I think this is the one that we'll just do a quick build out of and figure it out. Did you see it, Charles?
I'm looking it up now. Oh,
you pasted it in chat. So you drag a line here. Let me I'll screen share.
Okay.
There, and we're gonna share this main screen there. So I don't know if you guys can all see. Oh, look, I see a side by side now. Let's see what Zoom looks like. Okay, so in Zoom you can see it. Here's the game. It's very simple. You take this, you drag, and you get to the end. Like I won, woo! Right, but it gets more and more complicated, right? So you go around corners, gets slightly more complicated, and eventually you get to parts where you're wrapping over and let's see, did it make it? And the levels are pretty complicated. Let's go to one of the further ones. So I went through and played this a couple times to try to get an idea of how it plays and what it's like. And it's got all kinds of crazy things once you get further along. Like, I don't know how you beat this one. Oh, I definitely can't do it that way. It's gonna be like that. Wait, no. Oh yeah, see, I messed it all up.
So
But you get the idea,
the
right? Like you have to go through and build a line. You can't go back on, or you can go back, but you can't go like back over a previous one. Like it can't cross over this. And you know, you fill out an area like if I do this, I'm screwed because I can never get into there. So it's not a super complicated game. I think there are a bunch of different ways that we could implement it. I don't know what you've got in mind. Does anybody have any other suggestion real quick before we do this, or any reason we should jump to something else? Because if not, I think this is a fun one to do. What do you think, Charles?
That looks fun. I mean, it's interesting because I was just noticing that you can actually beat the same level multiple ways.
Yes, I think
So
there
that's
are
kinda
going to be
cool.
on a lot of levels. There are probably multiple ways to beat them. I think that's more the case as you're earlier on too. Like, let me see, pick like a medium one that's not super hard and not super easy. Like here, level 10. So
Oh,
here
yeah.
you'd go like you can only go around that way, otherwise you wouldn't make it, right?
Mhm.
All right, maybe you can go this way too. Oh yeah, you could also go this way. So yeah, you're right. So there's nothing really stopping it from going that way. So I guess I'll just kick up a new project. So I made an empty project. It's still in a beta version. I haven't updated this version. But I don't think it's going to be an issue. And I figured we'd just start coding along and
Come on, man. I want to use that high definition render pipeline for this.
the HDRP for our cubes.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah, hopefully everybody can see everything. Does everything look okay on the screen there in YouTube, or is it?
Yeah, it looks good. I mean, you got a
Hopefully
big
it's not too small.
that there's a big dark section on the right. That might be where you have
That
some
is my inspector tab. So for some reason, it's just an issue with this beta. I've had where the tab like disappears and then this black area appears. I don't know. It's a new issue with this version of the beta. Okay, somebody else said it was too small. Let me see if I can change my display settings real quick.
Someone says,
my
can you add
resolution down to 1080. What was that?
Someone had said that can you add some 3D flavor to this concept?
Possibly. I think
Probably lay down the groundwork and then use 3D models after we got the basics.
Yeah, we could do that. It'd be interesting. All right, so we've got. Is this better? Can you see it a little bit bigger? I changed to 1080p.
It's looking good better. To me. Someone says perfect. That's a good sign.
Great. All right. Oh, I guess ideas. So how do you want to start? We got. I guess like what I was thinking is there are a couple different ways that we could handle the data for this. We could either build out some sort of a 2D map of like all of the available spots and whether you're there or not. We could also just slap out cubes and check the distance. If it's not farther than a meter away and you haven't touched it before, it's valid too. Or I don't know. Like it seems like there are probably a lot of options.
It's like implicit versus explicit. You can explicitly define what your board is, or you can just implicitly, just by virtue of where you place the blocks and it checking in real time, to know if it's crossed over itself or if all the blocks have been filled in.
Yeah. And I intentionally didn't think too much about the options so that this would be harder. Tried not to think too much about what we could do or what we should do or ways to do it, because this is the kind of thing that would normally happen. I'd come up with the problem and then think about what our options are, maybe even do a little research on possible options.
Yeah. I feel like I always like to start with the data structure first. And I just imagine, like, off the top of my head, I guess no idea is stupid, so I'm just gonna say this. Maybe you have like a 2D array to represent the board, and then every time the line enters into that space, you can increment a number. So let's say it's an int array is what I meant to say. So you increment. So if it goes over one space, it'd be 1. And then if it ever goes greater than 1, you know that it's not filled, or it's filled
Yeah, we can
twice.
just use bools too, right? Like on
Or
and,
bools.
and only allow you to go to ones that are off.
Yeah, that's true.
So
That's true too.
let's start.
I like to start with data, the data first, and then try to like put it out into a log, and then work on the UI afterwards, or like the visual representation of it.
Just call it game board for now for the data structure.
Yeah.
Seems like a good one. Somebody asked if there was a reason we were using this specific beta version. No, it's just the beta version that I happen to have installed. So been using this beta version for some other stuff. There might be an update available. There probably is. The only reason is I'm trying to get used to the new UI, get really comfortable with it, and I also just kind of like some of the features in the new editor. It seems faster, snappier, and kind of cool. And
yeah, I
mostly I got used to the new UI. All right, let's pull over Writer here. So anybody that's not using Writer, by the way, it's just another code editor. It works same as Visual Studio. I just like it a little bit better because it gives me tips and hints and makes me slightly better coder. And I feel like it's a little faster and easier to use. I also love Visual Studio though, so I use it outside of this all the time for other stuff. But
that light theme.
Clear on that. Okay, so our game board may or may not be a mono behavior. I'll make it not a mono behavior for now because we don't know that it needs to be. And get lots of zoom ticks here.
Nice.
And we're thinking an array of ints or array of bools, double array. Like
yeah, and basically the game board will just encapsulate, moving through the positions on that. But the idea
so it would encapsulate keeping track of which one is current, and because that's the other thing we need, right? We need like the current position.
Sounds about right.
These obviously are not going to stay as public, badly named variables, but I want to give them something right now. So we need to keep track of like the current position, which will just be an X and a Y, and then all of the available positions, and anything else.
Well, we don't know if this is going to be a mono behavior or not, but I reckon what do you call it? A constructor to create the array based on the sizes you passed in.
Should we do that, or should we do like a factory to generate these things?
We could do that. Yeah, factory would be nice.
Let's try that.
Get down with
like
one line of code, and I learned a new thing. Some people had never seen a double bool array.
Oh, yeah, double array. So you get the first index and second index. Okay, so game board factory, you have like a public static game board, and then give it int. So this is not going to give us custom fancy boards. It's just going to give us square boards for now. I think that's a good place to start though.
Yeah.
And we do like a maybe it should just I don't know.
Right.
Maybe a constructor is the way, because more thinking about this. Yeah, let's do that. Let's change it. So CTOR and tab, by the way.
Well, if you wanted to keep those private, you could just have the factory be a subclass of game board, and then it would have access, I think, to the private variables.
Yeah, I was just thinking more that we're not using the factory to do anything other than make a 2x2 array, so it might be overkill.
Gotcha.
Like I had the default of like, hey, we should make a factory for this thing. I'm like, oh, maybe we shouldn't.
You've broken the first rule. Don't overcomplicate things.
Exactly. So set our size X and Y, then we'll initialize positions. A new bool array of size X. Do we want to do width and then height?
Yes.
X, yeah.
Width and then height, yes. Or row.
Oh, why did I make these float? Sorry.
Rows and columns.
Oh yeah,
However
that's
you
a
want to
good
word
idea. I like that more.
it.
So this would be current column, current row. There we go. Wait, what's the problem here? Oh. Wait a minute. What am I missing?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
I almost never use double double arrays. So.
That should be fine. Maybe we just take it. Wait, yeah, mouse over. Let's see what he has to say. Expected.
Is it just a
Yeah.
comma?
Oh, is it comma? Yeah. Oops.
No, I don't think it is a comma either. I'm trying to remember. It has been way too long.
Here, let me Google that. How to initialize a
This is exactly what I mean, right? Like the things that you forget.
I have not
all
done
the
something like
time.
this since like all right. Multi-dimensional rays.
So I've done the other ones too, where we do like a comma there.
Oh, look at this. So yeah,
Like
I think that's the
you do
answer.
it that way, but I've done the ones with 2 brackets. I just don't remember how I did them.
I feel like I have too.
Maybe that was C++.
Someone says one is an array of arrays and the other is a 2D array. That's what it was.
Oh, okay.
Yep. We were creating an array of arrays.
That makes sense.
So
okay, and then this is the multi-dimensional array. Much better. Thank you. Again, kind of stuff happens all the time. Okay, so here we go. We got a multi-dimensional array of bools in a game board that we will create. All right. So if we create it like this, like our first game board creator, let's see, how do we want to do that? So I like the first thing I want to do is just create like a game board that's maybe like 2 by 2.
got it.
So that we just do, because I think the line one is really boring. So do like a 2 by 2, a 2 by 2 board. And then we need to represent it visually and create it. So make a mono behavior that just creates a game board for now.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Game board creator. Nice.
It's my test class to make a game board. So do like a on enable. Columns. Do we do columns then rows?
That's a good question.
I think we did.
Yeah, we did columns and rows.
Okay. So this would be like, I'm just gonna set these to 2. Again, you're making them public because this is a little throwaway class. These will get renamed if we actually decide to keep any of this. But I think right now, just use 2 by 2. We'll create a new game board and then make that game board visible somehow.
Yeah, so now that'll be the challenge, displaying it.
So now we need to bind it up to something that can render it. Well, first let's move the game board creator into its own file. Alt-Enter, by the way. So you just select the class. Anybody who didn't see that, you just go on it, select the class, hit Alt-Enter, and there's a move to type if you're already in there and it's a different class than the file name. So just moved it right over to its own class. So this is going to make my game board. And then we want to do something in here to actually show the game board and render it now. So I think we need some sort of a view layer. I don't know if we want to do this in UI or 3D. I mean, I guess we talked about doing it, maybe adding a 3D component. So we just build it as a 3D game instead of a 2D UI one, just in case we decide to go with that route. So let's select the main camera. I'm just going to reset the camera over to 0, raise it up a little bit on the Y, and then point it down, which I think is, 90 on the X?
You could like genericize it by having an interface called game board drawer and however it decides to draw it.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to do something like that. Let's hear. I'll just make a empty cube at 0, 0 real quick. And look at the game view. And then actually here, let's play side by side. So what I was thinking, and Charles, let me know if you got other ideas or better way to do this. Okay. But what I was thinking is we could just set up some class that is responsible for just spawning a prefab at each of those positions and then rendering that thing, basically a prefab or a cube that's mapped straight over to our data structure. So a position on the board. So when that position on the board changes, or the cube changes, or when the cube sends, the cube maybe is, I guess the cube is getting the input and then sending something to the game board.
Yeah, I mean, the cube technically would represent like a space that is accessible, I guess, where you could draw a line.
Yeah.
And then so, and it could be anything. I mean, it could be a cube, it could be, like you said, if we use a UI. But whenever it receives the input that we'd expect, I imagine it would send a signal down to the game board, the actual data structure, to notify it, hey, look, I'm moving to this location.
It seems right. All right. So let's get the view set up. Some sort of a game view that just draws it. Well, first, let's see. Let's move this stuff around. So I'm going to take the camera here and just pull it up. Go up to like 10 meters. And set this to a solid color, clear, and just make it like black so that it looks cool, right? And then the other thing I want to show real quick before we go into the code is if I duplicate this cube and move it over, see if we get the perspective change. So go to the camera and change that to orthographic. So they look nice and flat. So yeah, I was thinking to make a class like a, what do you want to call it? To render the game board.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, oh wow, game board view. I don't know. That sounds awful.
That was as good as I come up with so far too. I was saying like a game board view. I don't know, like
or game board drawer. I don't know. That's like something on Unity property drawer or
it does kind of sound like a property drawer or drawer.
I think it's drawer.
Drawer. Oh, wait, what? That's it. Okay. So here, like, set game board. This is really just like a binding command. So we need some way to, when we create a game board, bind to that game board up to the view. Okay, so I think the game board creator could just create a game board and then pass it into the view for now.
Yeah, I mean, what I've been doing lately is instead of doing a bunch of setters and getters on mono behaviors, I've just been more comfortable leveraging attaching them to the same game object and calling get component. I mean, we can do whatever, but
this one's not a
the game. Oh, you're right.
The game board is not a mono behavior, right? Because it's going to change every time we generate a new one.
Yep.
If we want to be able to dynamically do them, or
we haven't.
Yeah. But yeah, no, totally agree. I get component all the time, just in a wake. The only time I don't do it is on things that have to get newed up all the time throughout the project. Right? So we're not generating, or allocating a bunch of stuff or making get component calls at runtime. Do them all in a wake. But yeah, I totally agree there. So we set a game board and do like game board like that and generate a field for it. So this will be our reference to our game board. And then, let's see. Do we need anything? This shouldn't be public, private. We probably don't need anything in an update yet. What I was thinking is we were talking about events. Maybe we should just have an event in the game board that calls back when a thing changes. Well, actually, no, let's just render first. Right? Before anything else, let's just do the damn drawing.
Sounds good.
So to get the game board, we need to instantiate the prefabs. So I think what I was going to do is just make a prefab field where we can just put in a cube and then have it spawn them all out.
Yep, I'm all about it.
So to add a serialized field, that'd be a private game object. Let's call it cube prefab. And then in here, we'll loop through the game board. So say like for each column in, or no, we need to do a loop, right? We need to do a for loop.
Yeah.
From I is 0 to game board dot. Oh, we don't have those exposed.
Yeah, right. I was wondering about that. Like, what's the
That's
best
okay.
way to?
We can do that. So let's pull in the scale takes a couple. So to do that, we'll just add a public int columns with a getter and a private setter.
You know, I'm pretty sure with Alt Enter you can go to. Oh, never mind. I'm dumb. Yeah, you're good.
Oh, wait, we do this,
Can
right?
you?
Generate, introduce a get only auto property for rows. Watch this.
Yes. Okay. I'm not dumb. Okay. Good.
No, you're right. Yeah, that's the way that I should have done it. Shortcuts.
Shortcuts. They're king.
There, and I fixed that one because I didn't do the other one right. So now these are set up as getters only, so they can only be set in the constructor. In fact, we can make them read only. They definitely can't. Oh, wait, then they have to be fields.
No, that's fine because that's just a getter. You'd make the ones below. Oh wait, no.
No, I think I want to do it like this. So they are public fields, but they're read only. So they can only change in the constructor. And I was only thinking because that actually makes sense for this scenario, right? Like in this case, we literally only ever want those to change in the constructor. So making them public read only fields will work.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And it's more explicit too, because if you make it a property with just a getter, I don't know. I think it's more explicit to say, hey, look, these are read only properties.
Yeah, it's definitely less ambiguous because a read or a getter only property could be anywhere, but a read only field like this means it's definitely set in the constructor. I'm going to move these all up, by the way. So it's just Alt Shift and just move these things up here somewhere.
That's another one.
Kind of in the right order, and get rid of all these extra using statements because we don't really need a bunch of extra junk in the code. Okay, that looks good. We're still not using these, so I'm going to ignore them for now. So we loop through gameboard.columns, and maybe I should rename this to like column. And then for each row, or for the rows, we'll do int row, we'll go gameboard.rows. So that's going to give us a loop through all of the columns and all the rows. Then we just need to create a cube. The game, somebody asked what game we're making too. It's this weird little, what's it called? Fill the line game. So you just look it up, you'll see it. That's what we're going to build out. Let's see. So next step, instantiate the prefab.
Yep. And I guess in this case, this is like a primitive sort of case. We're just going to put it at the world position based on the column and row.
Oh yeah, it actually makes a lot of sense. Make it nice and simple, and we can always offset that.
Yep.
You do an instantiate of the cube prefab. Give it a position, so give it like a. All right, here, actually, let's pull that part out. Let's just do the position. Var position equals new vector 3, and we're going to give it column, comma, whoops, no, call, comma, 0, comma, row. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
The middle one would be your Y up and down in world space. And then you need to give it a quaternion.
Actually, you know what I want to do is set this as
oh.
Wait, no. Let me think. I want to instantiate it as a child of this. I think then I'll just set the position. Is there an overload for that? There's so many instantiate overloads.
There we go. So you got, so if you just do you can do the position and a quaternion.
But I want the parenting first because I want these to all be children of the view.
Got it. Yeah. Well, so I don't think they have an overload for that one.
All good. We'll just set the position. Here, then I guess I don't need this. Need a variable there to use 2 lines later. Okay, so that should spawn. So we set a game board, spawn a bunch of things. That's it. Let's save.
Yeah, it looks simple enough.
Go back over here, actually set it up and test it out real quick. I just realized all my lights turned off. Why'd that happen?
Someone says you can pass a third argument as the parent. Let me look that up.
Can you pass that with a position though?
Because I feel like you you should be able to.
I would think so, but there's so many overloads there. I've lost track.
Like a million of them.
All right, so I'm going to turn this cube into a prefab.
Yeah, well, it's going to be the prefab, position, quaternion, and then finally the last one's the parent.
Oh, okay.
Try that.
Like
and also,
that.
You have to, the position. Fun fact. Oh, you can do that too. You could, there's a shortcut, Control-Alt-V. It'll actually introduce a variable.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. I don't think I've tried that one before. All right, so now we're instantiating it in one call, even better. So tiny performance improvement. And then let's see, we need to make prefab. Create a folder, prefabs, and we'll just take our beautiful cube and drop it into there. Then we make a game object for our, what did we call that thing? The something spawner?
Game board viewer, I think, or creator.
Yeah, we need both. Game board creator and a game board view. And assign the scripts. Assigned, and then we got to set up that the cube prefab here. So go down to prefabs and assign the cube prefab. And if I save my scene,
is the creator calling game board view?
It is not. If I save my scene and hit play, nothing will happen.
I was waiting for you.
Get a compiler error, maybe. Let's see if I can build real quick. Make sure the error is gone.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So set game board actually needs to get called by the creator. Somebody was talking about using var. I see.
I agree.
Chat about that.
I don't like to use. What do you like to be explicit?
It depends. I use var on things like if we go back over here, like position. Yeah, I know it's a vector 3, right? Like it's named position. It's right there. It's fine. And the instance of the game object. In the cases where I know the type and it's really obvious, I use var. When it's not obvious, then I switch to the variable name. As soon as I like can't look at it and just know, then I'll switch to the variable type. Unless the variable type's some obscenely long thing, 30 plus characters long. All right. So set game board needs to get called by the game board creator. So we create it. We'll just find it for now. That's wrong. Game board. Get rid of that extra using statement 2. Okay, so there we go. That should find it and set the board whenever we re-enable the board creator. By the way, I like to use on enable for these just so I can toggle the thing on and off and run the code a bunch of times.
Nice.
Get lazy. Yeah, let's just flip that on and off. I also get used to like projects where starting up sometimes takes a long time. So being able to just toggle a game object on and off to run code makes it easy. Let's see. Let's hit play. And okay, well, something happened, right? So game board view ran. We got some cubes.
I think it worked.
It did.
Our cube is a big square.
Does it just looks like a big?
Oh, hey, I gotta take a
call. So if I disable a cube,
I'll be right back. I gotta take a quick phone call.
Yeah, go ahead. So yeah, it looks like it's all working, right? We've got our 4 cubes here. I could change the color of them or something, and you'd see that they're all different. But we've got the 4 basic empty cubes there, right? I'm going to use var for loops just because int and var are the same length. So using int, just, yeah, there's no benefit. Plus, if I type 4 and hit tab, it's going to auto pick int. So I don't have to type that out. No reason for me to go back and change it, make it less obvious. So yeah, I think we've got the view set up, and the next part's going to be reading inputs and sending that data back down. Well, here, let's play with that creator real quick, right? So if I change the creator and make this like 5 rows and 3 columns and hit play, we should see the same result. There we go, bam. We could definitely do an outline around them or something. It's just that in the actual game that we're cloning, that's not really how they are. They're more like this. They're these gray areas, and then we're clicking through and filling them out. In fact, perhaps I should change it so that the background is white and that these are gray. Let's reload this one more time because I think that would help. Let's play. I'm gonna get back in. But yeah, I think white backgrounds and gray inside. Let's see. Let's try like level 9. Yeah. So let's go for that. Let's go for white on the back and this light gray in the front. I'll make these changes right now. So take the gray, or here, let's take the main camera background to solid white. I like that. We can see a little outline there of our cube. And then we'll take the cube and, oops, got to go select it. And oh, we need to make a material for it. So we'll go in, create a folder for art. I'm not going to have much art, so I'm just going to put the material right here. And we'll just create a new empty material and call this cube. And we'll assign that to our cube. Just drop it right on. Where's our renderer? Mesh renderer, materials. There we go. Like blind today. So anyway, assign it to there. Then we can expand it out and change the color to be more of that gray. There we go. And let's apply that prefab change. So let's go up to overrides and just hit apply all. So it updates our prefab. Hit play one more time, and we should see cubes that look a little bit more like that. There we go. Not bad. Now the other thing that they did is they were starting off with a cube enabled, right? So that it was green and selected. I don't know if we should start there or if we should just jump over to being able to open and select stuff. Let's see. Oh, just looking real quick for any other questions too. Could use it for chunk loading. Not really. It would, you need to load in chunks of stuff in slightly different way. You want to do them all asynchronously and stuff. Are there other questions real quick? Following tutorial series, notice creator that is into nested if statements, 3 levels of nesting. Oh, okay, that's what the discussion's about. Yeah, nested if statements tend to be terrible. They tend to be like an easy way to solve a problem immediately, but then it turns into a bit of a mess and gets very, very hard to follow later and really easy to break things. I'd try to minimize your nesting of things. Let's see, anything else? Yeah, the camera could find the center point of the grid. Somebody mentioned that. So we'll do that later. We'll just move the camera over. And then I think that's it. So I'm just going to jump back into coding unless people pop up more questions. So we've got the board here, and the next thing we need to do is read some sort of input. Here, let's hit play again. See what it looks like. But we need to read some sort of input and look for me holding down the button and what cube I'm on. And then we need to send that to something. So let's make a little game controller. I don't know exactly what I want this to do and how I want to architect it out. So we'll start with something simple like a game controller, and then we can split out the functionality from that as we go along. By the way, everybody's still watching. If you're still watching, you don't mind hitting the like button and sharing. That'd be super helpful. Just gets it out there for more people join, and we get to do more cool, fun stuff. All right, so we got a game controller, and in here, I lied about the name. I think this is really going to be starting off as like an input controller. So let's make that explicitly private, and then let's do something to read the input. So say like if input.mouse, but get mouse button. Yeah, get mouse button 0. So this is whether or not we're holding down the left mouse button. So if we are holding down the mouse button, try select new cube, or try move to new cube. Let's try that. I think that'll be my name for the method. So let's hit enter and create a method for that. And next thing I want to do is just figure out what cube that I'm on. It is default to private. Somebody asked. The method here, when it's like that, is defaulted to private. I just have a habit of making them say private so that when they're all collapsed, they line up nice and neatly. It drives me nuts when they don't line up now. It didn't used to. I used to not do that at all, but now I'm weird and I just do it every time so that they line up. Hey, what's up, Charles? You're muted, but welcome back.
Hey, thanks for letting me know. I started talking to no one.
Just sat here and talked like, that's very interesting. Tell us more.
That's funny.
So setting up a game controller, Charles. I answer a couple quick questions, and then setting up a game controller to read input and then try to enable a cube. So what I was thinking is we'll just do a raycast from the camera, shoot in, see if we find a cube, and then see what position that thing is associated with. Although we don't have any of that information yet. So.
Alrighty.
So I think we'll do like a ray equals camera, and I'm gonna do something dirty here. Main camera.main screen point to array. So if you use camera.main, like don't use it for real. We're just using it temporarily because it finds the thing by tag every time you do it. So we're gonna use the camera. We're gonna get position of vector 2.0. And the reason for that, or sorry, vector 2.1 divided by 2. That's what I like to do. So what we're doing there is just getting a ray into the screen from the center of the screen. So when you pass in screen point to ray, it's 0 to 1, like from the bottom to top and left to right. So if we go 0.5, 0.5, it's right in the center. So we just do a ray cast straight in the center. Yeah, camera.main. It's beautiful. We'll cache that later. In fact, we could even we could do something like add an awake or an on enable and just do camera equals find object to type, and we just find the only camera that we're going to have. There, let's do that. Let's pretend that we're keeping things somewhat clean. There we go. No camera.main. So we'll find the one camera right when we enable our controller, and we'll use that. Now, normally we should have some sort of a camera controller or something to manage all this, but we're only going to have one scene, I think. So we'll do a ray cast, and then, or we'll get array, then do a ray cast. So do if physics.arrayCast, and we give it our ray out. This part I love, by the way. Raycast hit info, and max distance. Really, I don't even care about a max distance. Like we don't have any background, right? We don't have anything to go back against. So we just want to get the first thing. I love that we can declare the type though here in the outs. It's so nice now, not having to do that a line before and initialize it. So then we want to get the cube. So we say hit info dot get dot collider dot get component, and we want to get something for our game piece. We don't really have anything like a script on there, so I think maybe we should just create one. I call this like a game cube. And we'll call that var game cube equals that. So we'll need to create a component for game cube. Does that make sense to you, Charles? Just making a component. I was thinking this could just have its position on it, basically.
Yeah.
It's going to have its X and its Y as variables instead of using the transform position in the world because it seems dirty. So
yeah,
I'll generate a type for it, and we'll make it a mono behavior, and we'll make that public.
I feel like we'll do some renaming later, but yeah, the idea is good.
GameCube's perfect. And name the next class Nintendo.
Yeah, right. NES.
Oh. So for this, we'll have a public int row with a getter and a column, and then public void, like what do we want to do? Just like an initialize to set these.
Oof.
That only sets them if they're not set.
Yeah. Go.
Right here, let's do an initialized variable. Invalid operation exception. Now, normally I wouldn't just go around throwing exceptions in here, but it's just going to log out an error if we screw it up. Generally, throwing an exception, not something I would necessarily want to do. I'd probably just do a log or something. But here, it's going to throw and just put an error right in there and say, hey, stop being stupid. I think it's fine for this
warning
case.
or something.
Yeah, well, in this case, yeah, it probably should just be, let's do it.
You already did this.
Let's do what I would really do, right? We would log an error, tried to initialize game cube, and we'd give it like a game object.name. By the way, the $sign here makes it so we can put the little brackets and start filling things in. At
string interpolation, in case anyone wants to know what that's called.
Column. But it was already set to row comma, column. There we go. I don't know. Whoops. If that formatted right, but first, let's fix the spelling. Initialize. There we go. So it'll just say that we tried to initialize the cube, give us the name of the cube if we happen to put a name there, the position we try to go, and then the position it was at. And then we'll return.
Short.
That shouldn't happen, but if we screw up and we try to initialize something that's already initialized, we'll get that problem. Okay, the next thing we do is just say row equals row, column equals column, and we're done.
If anyone wants to know that pattern, I guess if you can loosely call it a pattern, it's called a guard clause. Having an if statement that short circuits your method.
Oh yes.
Called a guard
right
clause.
At the top, where you just check and bail out, log an error, or something else.
Private setters. You got to add some private setters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do have to make these settable. There we go. So I think that's good. Let's move this to its own file. So again, anybody who's not doing this normally, just select the class, hit Alt-Enter, and hit Move to Type, or Move Type to File, and it'll just move it right over. So now we've got a game cube initialized. Go back over to that game board view, because the game board view is what creates the cubes. And here we'll just say instance.initialize. Oh, wait, we're not initializing it as a game cube though. So we need to change this prefab type first. There we go. Then we can give it our row and column.
Nice.
Although, did we do column and row on everything else first? We did. We did columns and then rows. So let's go into here and watch this. What is it? Control-Shift-R, change signature. Watch this. Select my row and hit move down. Hit next. Magic. Right. The joy of Writer, just rearranged my variables because it also rearranged them here. I was like, that's why it's good, because it fixed all the calls to it too. So now they map. All right, so we're initializing the game cube. Our game board view is set up. Well, okay, we were going to do the game controller. So now that we can get a game cube out of it, we just get those positions and set something on it. I almost feel like the game cube should be responsible for telling us whether or not it's valid.
Oh,
maybe
valid
not.
Space.
Or whether or not it's already set. I don't know. Maybe no. And now I don't feel like that. I felt like that for a second, but now I don't. Let's see. So our game controller. I think that our game controller needs a reference to the game board. That make sense?
Let me see. Let me catch up here. Oh, so you're trying to move to the new cube.
So the whole goal was hold down the mouse button, try to move to a new cube. So we can figure out what cube is there, but then we need to link that to the game board data and get the state of that position.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the game board, is the object that knows the state. So
I was thinking is like right now our game board, it sets the game board on the view. Maybe it should set it on the game controller, and then the view should just look at the controller. That make more sense?
Yeah, let's try that.
So do like a game controller, sorry. So this would be game controller. And then we'd make set game board there, which would just do that and get rid of all the extra code. Anybody who hasn't used these, by the way, they're just expression body methods. So it's just a simple setter. We can use the lambda here and then put the one line of code that it's going to do. Since it's just setting, it's fine. So we'll set the game board there. And then the game board view. Oh, maybe this is a good time to use events. All right. The game board view could just listen for the game board updating.
And then update its spaces accordingly.
Yeah, I think so. Does that make sense? Does that seem like a good idea?
So the game board view right now is only responsible for basically drawing a representation of the game board in the scene.
Yes, well, it's really for handling those cube prefabs, right? So it's spawning them, and then those things are able to be collided with the simple raycast.
So it has a reference to a game board. So basically, when things happen on the
I don't think it even needs a reference to the game board, though.
Right, it doesn't.
Does
It's, I mean, at this point, all it's responsible for is just drawing it initially.
Yeah, it's really like a game board spawner.
Yeah.
And
when you think about spawner, like, I mean, technically the game board is spawned in memory, but this is responsible for spawning its representation. And in this case, its representation is it just builds a bunch of cubes. So technically, it could draw it as any way we want. I mean, we could draw it in the console, or we could draw it in the, draw it with the UI. But I think right now it's just putting these cubes in space.
Yeah.
All right. So
I want to rename this.
Yeah, draw game board.
I mean, I want to change it again, I think, but I think that seems okay. Okay, if we go this route, then the game controller should find the camera. We don't necessarily need a game board creator anymore. This was initially going to be a temporary class, but I also don't want to put rows and columns into game controller. So maybe I'll keep this around for now.
I don't know, but if you think about it, game controller, never mind. I was going to say game controller fundamentally controls the game. So, maybe it should have access to the columns and rows for this particular game.
But it should be getting that from somewhere else, right? Let's maybe make a scriptable object.
Yeah, maybe.
Give it a set of scriptable objects.
Call it game
data
settings or level. I mean, because, if you think about it, it's the level is the one who knows. Each
true.
level has a different set of rows and columns, and it has a whole board. If you put to do : in front of a comment like that, writer treats it as something. Visual
Pops
Studio
up down here.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Another tip for you guys. I'm like a writer power user.
In the to-do list. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, though. I think we'll keep going, build it, and then turn this into some sort of level scriptable object or data structure or something. Yeah. Seems right. Yeah. Somebody mentioned public is for more than the inspector. Yeah, public is for accessing things outside of the code, and generally bad. That's one of the reasons that these need to change. Like, these should be serialized fields that are private.
Another fun tip. I think it's S. If you type S prop, that's a live template for serialized fields.
You type S what?
S field. Right now, hit tab. Now you can type int and then tab.
That's not bad. That's a new one for me. All right, I'm learning new things. Thank you, Charles.
And then S prop will make a serialized field that acts as a backing property for a private field. S prop.
Oh, that is beautiful. All right, I'm learning more shortcuts. I love it. Don't forget to hit like for Charles's shortcuts.
On my video, not his.
No, don't hit it on his. Right. Okay, let's see. So we've got the game controller, and the game controller getting enabled is now going to call the game board creator and just say get a game board. And we'll make this return a game board. And we'll make it public. So we'll do this. It'll just generate that, and we won't do that. Return game board. So this will be like a level or a level generator eventually.
I got another little shortcut for you. Now I think this might work, but it seems like you're using Visual Studio shortcuts for your writer. I don't know if you set that up.
I left it as a default writer one so I could get used to them.
If you go to back over to that class, I think it was the game board creator,
Yes.
and you put your caret anywhere in the word game board on that return.
This one?
Yeah. And if you hit Control Alt N, it should create an inline. It should inline it.
It did not.
Control Alt N. No, it didn't. Darn. Yeah, I don't know what my settings are. I thought I had mine as mine are as IntelliJ. That's what it is. Because I come from
Okay.
Java.
So you're saying because we could just return back that new game board?
Yeah. I use it. I use that one. I use Control Alt V and Control Alt N all the time to inline and then create and introduce variables.
Now it's just shrunk down to a tiny little expression body.
Oh wow.
Writer. So this is, again, when people ask why I use Writer, it's because it just kind of reminds me to do things like this and shorten up the code and get rid of a bunch of extra nonsense. All right, so let's go back to the game controller. So game controller hits, we enable, we need to get the game board creator. So say like, or let's add an awake here. Because what we'd really do is cache all this kind of crap in awake. So move that up here. And we'll go game board creator. Let's find object type. And then in on enable, I want to actually create a board. So say like game board creator dot get game board. Okay, now we don't need a set game board method anymore because that's already being done. And we can delete that. And then we just have to call into the UI. So find that game board view. We'll get the game board view right here and generate a field for that. And then we can just set the, or what did we call it? Oh, I forgot the name. This is downside to renaming things. Draw game board.
Draw game board, yeah.
Okay, so now we'll create a board. Our game controller should have it, and then tell our view to draw it. Let's try that.
All right.
And then we can
here.
start reading input. Oh, I changed the colors, by the way.
Okay.
In a way when I changed this.
Just trying to blind me.
Yeah. Oh, I was trying to match the actual game. Oh, we need a game controller. Let's create that. Game controller. Somebody asked why I put underscores there. Do you want to tell them why, Charles?
Go back.
Why I put underscores in the code
for the field names?
Yeah.
So basically for private member variables, you prefix your variable names with an underscore. This is not a hard and fast rule. This is just generally accepted syntax. So for private member variables, I mean, I personally always put an underscore before the variable name. For public member variables, I make them Pascal case, which is capitalized. The first level capitalized and the rest is camel case. I don't know how to describe it. Pascal case.
You're right. Yeah, it's Pascal case. Now, I did the same, and it's the same reason. It's just to make it obvious that those are private member variables and that they're not parameters or something else. Pascal case is basically standard naming, but every word you capitalize. So it's not just like you capitalize the first letter, you capitalize every word. And then camel case is same, but the first letter is lowercase. I did not add the cube script to our cube, so getting errors. So what I was going to do is add that real quick.
Someone asked what a member variable is. Just answer that since it's related. A member variable is a variable that's associated with the class. So like if he has the class game board, then the row and int variables are member variables. They're part of that class, as opposed to being a variable of some other class. There's something else I was going to say. Oh, on the same vein of naming things, something that I've been doing recently. Oh, can you hear me?
I need to apply my prefab.
Oh, God.
I'm sitting here coding along while you're talking and it's not working. I didn't hit apply on the prefab. Happens all the time. I was about to start debugging. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, someone just put M underscore. That's such a pet peeve of mine. I never use that. But what I was going to say is that something I've recently started to do is for serialized fields that are private, I'll nix the underscore. So I'll just do camel case. Just something I've been doing with mono, and that's only in mono behaviors, obviously, and only for serialized fields. And I don't know, I kind of like it. For me personally, it is a solid indicator that something that a variable that I'm referencing is private, but accessible in the editor. And I think writer even like will make it bold if you get rid of the underscore.
Oh, nice. Yeah. For a while, I got rid of the underscores completely and just used tooling to help with that. But then the problem that I ran into was that everybody else on the team isn't going to do it, right? Like I've tried. You're not going to get everybody on the team to install special tooling. So unless like the default tooling does it and makes it obvious, I just go for putting it in the code.
If there's no tooling in place, then I think all bets are off. I think anyone's just going to.
Well, I mean, if there's no special tool, like if everybody's using Writer, awesome. But a lot of projects I work on, like people are using Mono Develop or Visual Studio or other stuff, and getting them to do plugins that do stuff and make it work right was just not possible. I've tried. So I ended up going back to underscores, and again, it's just literally so that you can tell the difference between the I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, the private members, like Charles was saying, and like local variables or parameters that come in. And somebody else is mentioning the M underscore stuff again. Yeah, I think the M was supposed to be an indicator that there was a member variable, and there'd be like I underscore for integers. Some people would do that. And I think the initial idea was supposed to be that they were supposed to be named for things, not the type, but like the thing. Like T was supposed to be for timers, and C was for counts and stuff. I just hate it because it's extra stuff that you have to type for no reason. Like I don't need an M underscore to know that it's a member. The underscore is enough for me. And then naming variables good enough tends to get around needing to put in the extra type stuff there. I'm going to stop babbling on about that though, because there's another issue here that my code's not working. Oh wait, is it working?
Well, I just wanted to say, well, maybe while you debug that, and I'll help you in a second.
It is working.
Jason, what other Jason? What do you want to be called? A piece of fruit? He's like, this needs to be a call-in show. Something he had said is like, basically anything you add to your code is information. I mean, you don't write code for the computer; you write it for yourself. Or we write code the way we do for ourselves, so we can read it. So, I mean, yeah, if the team you're on is like, hey, look, my eyes are really used to the M underscore, well, then that additional information is going to be valuable to that particular team. But, when you really think fundamentally about the whole, hey, why do you put an underscore for private member variables? It really is just to in the simplest way, articulate to the reader that this is a private member variable, which may not be obvious if you're 100 lines deep and you can't see the private member variables, on the screen. Because, if you have a local variable, then it's not going to have an underscore. So if you have two variables next to each other and you don't have an underscore for either of them, you're really not going to be able to tell. But again, really, I don't know. There's the argument that you can say to each their own, but I think there are some things that, are fundamentally valuable. And I personally think that that's one of them.
I agree.
That's my rant. I'm done.
Yeah, good coding standards and naming is super important, and it gets undervalued and underlooked a lot. So 100% on there. So I'm looking at my little LEDs lighting up over here every time I move. They're still set up for the motion sensor in that dude. I got I don't know if you can see them here. The little lights pop on. Oh, does it light up? Can you see it on the screen?
Kind of.
It's I can't get it to light up now. I can't move in front of it. Move. Motion sensor. These things are neat, but there we go. It lit up. I don't know if there it's lit. And it went down. And I got a little speaker set up, but it's distracting. I look over there. I'm like, oh, look at that, lighting up in my face. Okay, let's get back onto code, I guess.
So those exceptions you have, they look to be like
these are all just editor problems with the beta. The code actually worked once I hit play and built. I think I hadn't built before. So if I play, I get a 2x2 cube. Everything I think kind of works.
Oops.
And if I modify the creator, like 4x2, we should get the cubes. Let's see. Yep. Okay. So the next step was going into our game controller. Or here. Next step is cleaning up this code because we're already there and it's messy. Now the next step is going into our game controller and trying to move. So we get a cube if we hit one. And the next thing we need to do is, I don't know, check with our game board and see the state.
Yeah, so all right, where are we at here? Sorry. So the game controller has pretty much, can you scroll up a little bit there?
Yeah, let's do a zoom out real quick first so you can see the entirety of the code.
You can double click on the tab too. It'll make it full screen. Or it'll minimize all the other windows.
Get rid of all the other stuff. Okay.
Yeah. All right, cool. So the game controller, it's doing what we think it should. It's controlling the game here. Sets the board, draws it.
We cache a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
On enable, we get a new board and we draw the board. And then in update, we're going to do a try move. So I think we need to read something from the game board to see if the position or if the current spot or if that spot is open. In fact, I feel like thinking about this more, if we look at our game board, these two fields that we didn't actually use probably don't belong here. I don't know what you think. The current row and column.
Well, all right. So the game, when we were showcasing the game earlier, we were playing it. It was you click and you drag, right? And that's how it picks up the thing. Okay, right.
So you click here and you start dragging,
and then it lights them up. So let's see if we can get as far as lighting some up. So the simplest case, I'm not quite sure if we're going to need those yet, but let's start with the simplest. Let's see if we can just light one up and then go from there.
So just do like GameCube dot become enabled or enable or light up.
Oh God, let's see. What would it be? Enable.
I think it's become filled because it's supposed to be a fill the line, right?
Yeah. And that is one that's only one representation. While I have the microphone in my face, that is only one that's one representation. So what is fundamentally what are we doing? We're
turning it green.
We're turning it green
and marking it as it's been filled, like the spot has been used.
Okay. I guess we'll just call it dot fill. I guess, unless that's taken.
Probably not.
All right.
So there we go.
So we're gonna fill it.
So do render dot material dot color equals fill color. None of those exist. So let's generate alt enter, create a field, call this renderer or type of renderer, and we'll add an awake. Get component renderer. So we're just gonna get that little cube mesh renderer. Generate a fill color, and we'll make that serialized and set it to green.
I've got another writer tip. If you go to the top of your class there, you can type rec comp, and that'll be another live template for required component. Oh, Q, REQ.
Got it. Oh, okay, nice.
I do have a video on that if anyone's interested. What's up, Devin?
That is nice. Okay, cool. So we fill it, we set it to that, and let's call it clear.
Yeah, I like that. Fill and clear. So the important thing so far to note is that right now, all this GameCube class is responsible for doing is just representing that an area is filled. Fundamentally, nothing's actually happening to our data object.
Right. And here I'm just caching the initial color in awake. So we have a clear method that can reset back to whatever that initial color is and not have to have it as a separate field too. It's easier if the designers can just go in and change it. So we got a fill and a clear. Clear is not used yet. And we have an unused system statement. All right. So is that it? That's it, huh? That should allow us to at least hold down and turn the green or turn the cubes green. Let's see. Nope.
At
So
least
what's
one.
happening? Why is this not working? Let's see. Nothing's happening at all.
You are
Look at our
clicking, right?
game controller. Go back into our game controller and figure out why it's not working. So I don't know what you normally do here, but my default is to just draw the ray real quick.
Okay. I would have been logging every step of the way. Probably should have mentioned. Like I would have logged every inch of that code. 4% of my code is logs.
Oh, and then you have to go back and delete all the logs later, though.
No, man, I don't delete my logs.
Oh, then they kill your game. Eventually, they kill things. Okay, so the ray is way the hell off. Why is it? Okay, let's see. Let's go to the main. It's nowhere near the main camera. Okay, the ray is always at 0, 0, 0. So there's an issue here. I must have missed something.
So you're casting a ray from the camera? Maybe you should just cast it from. Can you cast a ray down from your mouse?
Yeah, that's what. Oh wait. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It should be in mouse position.
You've been working with first-person controllers too long, man.
Yeah, so I don't want to shoot down in the center of the screen. I want to shoot down at the mouse position. I would have missed that too. I would have sat there for like 20 minutes trying to figure it out on my own. Why is it wrong? Just all right. So if we don't want to use the center, there we go. So I can hold and light up all of these. The ray isn't going all the way down, by the way.
Progress. Making progress. The power of pair programming. Damn right.
It's amazing. Turn off that cube. Turn on.
We got Jason in here. The other Jason, we'd be doing extreme programming or mob programming.
Oh, I know. I was gonna send him a link too, but I couldn't find him on Google Chat.
Look, send him the Zoom give link. Me a week. I'll figure out how to get OBS working, and all three of us will be in here. Going
if you want, just if you got him on Google Chat, just send him the Zoom link. You can hop right in. To give me a chance to run to the bathroom.
Let me ask him.
Get another drink. Jason, you want to hop in the call real quick? So just shoot.
I'll send him a link just in case.
We can send you the invite link and keep going over the stuff. So that's working. They're lighting up. I do need to run off to the bathroom real quick though. And
all right, I'm gonna send him a link so that we can.
So okay, cool.
We'll
take like a 30-second or like 2-minute break real quick, and I don't know if Charles wants to just answer questions.
I'll answer some questions.
Charles, answer questions. I'll be right back. This is perfect. I love it.
Do my best. You're like, hey, go to the bathroom now. See any questions? Can someone? Oh, all right. So the game we're making right now, I keep forgetting what it's called. Shoot, I think it's called Line Filler. Let me look it up. Oh, it's called Fill Line. I'll drop a link in the chat. There. We need more Charles as well. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. There can only be one Charles. I think Jason's going to hop on soon, so that'll be cool. I'm thinking about doing a stream, I guess once a week. Now I've been doing it with Jason. This is the second week, so hopefully we can do this again, and hopefully I can show you that inventory that I was working on. So, Charles, what is your favorite green? Probably I'd say forest green. You know, because it's all natural. And I like the forest. In fact, I just moved near the forest. What's the idea of the game? So basically, there's some squares. There's a game board, and there are certain, you can think of a game board made up of a grid of squares. And so you click on one and it'll light up the square. And as you move the mouse around the game board, it'll start filling up the squares. It's a terrible explanation, but I'm just going to keep going. There are some spots on the game board that you cannot fill up. They're like, I guess, I don't know. They're like blocked. And so the idea is you want to fill up the entire game board by moving your mouse over the squares, but you can't cross over your previous path. So I don't know. Hopefully we'll finish it, and then you'll be able to see it in action. Have I been shadow banned? Question regarding ECS. No, you haven't been shadow banned. I'm sorry. I missed your question. Regarding ECS, for a mid-sized RPG game, do you recommend ECS or not? I mean, if performance is you're taking a real big hit on performance due to, having a lot of concurrent operations or a lot of data moving around in your RPG, maybe you've got a lot of things you're managing, like a weather system and, a dialogue system, and there's like all these things that are happening all the time while your player moves throughout the world, then yeah, I mean, I think ECS would be valuable. But yeah, you don't want to put the cart before the horse. You don't want to leverage and get locked into something like ECS if you really don't need it. But I mean, I've always liked ECS. Obviously, I did a whole series on it. So I mean, if it's something that you think will be pretty data intensive, then yeah, I think go for it. You could definitely leverage ECS. What else? Charles, please lure Jason over to the dark theme before my eyes burn out from all this white. Yes. Well, looks like
I'm using the dark theme in Unity. When I use dark theme, my eyes burn out because I like to have my room super brightly lit. In fact, it kind of drives me nuts how dark it is right now. So it'd be tough. I've tried.
You know what's funny about the light theme though? I've actually heard that it isn't necessarily true that the dark theme is better for your eyes. I've actually heard that light theme is technically easier to read. Something about contrast.
Yeah, my eyes are super, super sensitive. Like I'm deaf as hell, but I can't hear anything, but I can see really well. And my eyes, like they get overwhelmed if it's dark and anything bright pops up. Like if I use a dark theme, it's fine if the text is relatively dark too, but as soon as something's bright and shines, like it just kills me. And then I got, all the monitors around me. So like the darkness and the brightness, it's too much. I totally understand that. I have a lot of friends who just love dark theme for some reason. I hate it. Yeah, cool. Was there anything else, or should we just get back? I don't know if you were in the middle of answering other questions.
No, we're good. There was a couple of questions. I think I got them all.
Okay, cool.
Well, let me check. Actually, let me check my chat. I'm sorry, guys. I'm neglecting my own chat.
It's terrible. By the way, we're at 99 likes. If anybody wants to be lucky number 200.
Wait, hold on a second. You're at 100. I'm only at 23. Come on, guys. Can you spare a like? All right, let me see what I got on my side.
Okay.
In case anyone's curious, I think, hey, other Jason's on.
Hey, other Jason. Welcome.
I wanted to create my own logger that uses conditional attributes, but I realized I needed to make some symbol manager. Yeah,
I close the other chat, so I'm not hearing triplicates.
Oh boy,
it's always fun.
Will real-time spotlights always put the FPS to impractical lower values? I'm not really a big expert on lighting, but yeah, I know with real-time lighting, they're switching from Enlighten, so I don't think they've worked out real-time lighting yet with like the new HDRP. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. It's less of a programming question.
Nothing here now. I still barely use HDRP stuff yet, just because I don't have any real projects that I have that are big. Were already in development, and they're probably not switching. So it's something I only use in small experiments, really.
Gotcha. Well, what I can say about that is that real-time lighting, I think they haven't worked it out yet. Hell yeah, man. 23 watching, and I got 27 likes.
Nice.
Thanks, guys. That's a heck of a ratio.
We're 87 away from 200 now. We'll get there by the end, I think.
Thanks, guys. You're awesome.
So I guess if we get back to by the way, I have like about 45 minutes left, maybe an hour. Then we can do this again, of course. But
heck yeah, weekly. If we can muster it, I'd be down.
Yeah, it'd be fun. I think these are a lot of fun. But I was thinking what we need to do is make it so that these reset real quick. Like when I release, just do like a game board reset. That makes sense?
Yeah.
And then we can go into the logic of whether or not a thing should light up.
So we'll need to keep track of when you press down and when you let go.
Yeah. Jason, can you see my screen share in Zoom, by the way? You should be able to have the updated version. So I think everybody else is like 10 seconds behind or something.
Yeah, I'm just moving windows so I can simultaneously see the chats and also the code
Oh,
and
fun.
everyone
Yeah,
else.
it's fun having lots of. That's what
Yeah.
I mean. Many
I've got
monitors.
so many tabs, so many chats.
People ask me why I have so many monitors. I'm like, I need more.
God, if I'm going to start doing this more often, I'm going to have to pull out one of the old monitors. I switched to one ultra wide a while ago. It seems to be the best for coding, just one giant ultra wide monitor. But I've got like 3 in boxes in various corners of my office that I can set up if I need to have a chat dedicated view.
Yeah.
You know, I find looking left to right is more difficult than looking up and down. What do you guys think about that? Sorry to go off topic.
I never look at that monitor over there. I look at these two, and that one just plays videos and like has the crap that I can't look at because it's too far to look. Like just going left to right.
I think I've tried every variation of monitors at some point. I remember a while ago there was the iFinity line of graphics cards, and they had the micro display ports. So you could have up to 6 monitors plugged into a single graphics card.
Holy hell.
And I had to set up a nice 6 monitor display, and it was just insanity. It's just too many screens. It's annoying, all the bezels. So I eventually ended up switching to dual monitor, and that was great, but I didn't like the bezel down the center. Then I switched to 3 monitors, and I found that despite 3 monitors, what I would keep doing is I would keep dragging windows from the sides into the center when I wanted to deal with them. It was almost like I had one single focus point and the rest was just arbitrary. So I realized the points of the second monitors are not to be work monitors, they're to be display monitors. So I ended up switching those to being vertical displays. And that way you can have them as strips for chats and things like that. And I would use it for Skypes, and I would use it for mood boards or for things I was working on. Or alternatively, you'd have it for your to-do lists. If you're doing like agile boards or something, you'd use the boards on one screen. But after all of that, I ended up realizing that I just prefer one giant monitor. It just saves a lot of messing, and yeah. So I've done the whole rounds.
Yeah, I'm still I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm in the process of maybe stacking my 2 4K monitors and then getting one long one to put vertical for like code or Discord or whatever. But yeah, maybe I just need to get rid of this bezel, because I think I would drag windows right in front of me if I didn't have the bezel there.
I don't know. I just use three monitors that match lined up in a row.
Here's an interesting one. Do you guys use Stream Decks?
Yeah, I've got my Stream Deck down.
Yeah, man.
I mainly just use it to switch my lights between white mode and different sets of colors, though.
That's freaking awesome.
More than anything else.
And I use it to switch my speakers from headphones from my DAC to my normal speakers. So yeah, it's pretty much I only use it for random stuff like that too.
It's all the things that where I would want a button and need a web page or something. So okay, I was adding the reset stuff here. So if we do a reset on release, should we I'm not sure what we should do, because right now there are 2 things going on, right? The GameCube doesn't actually do anything. Like we call fill. Actually, where's this called from again? We call the fill, but we should probably set something in the game board.
Yeah, to keep, I mean, because the game board is the underlying data structure.
Actually, you know what we should do is make in the releasing, we should reset the game board like that, right? Some sort of a reset. And then I think, I don't know how they implement that yet, but I think then, actually I do. I'll just go through and zero them all out, I think. But the other thing we need to do is call into the view and tell it to redraw the game board, right? Or to refresh the game board.
So instead of...
Or should we make the board...
I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, it feels a little expensive, but yeah, I mean, instead of having to keep track of every lit cube and saying, okay, let me go back and unfill these or whatever, you're just saying, screw it, let's just wipe it out.
Well, we could just reset them. Doing a draw is probably bad. We'd probably do like an update. But I was thinking maybe the game board view should just know that the board that a position changed or a thing changed in there and get reset. But I don't know if it necessarily needs to.
You can call when you do draw a game board on the game board view can just keep track of all the game cubes, have a list of game cubes that it creates, and then when you call reset on the game board view, it could just loop.
Just update them all to the correct state.
Just hit empty, yeah. Empty.
That's not a bad idea. So if we keep like a
list of those.
What if we do it like that?
Or an array.
right? And just make it match.
I would just make, personally at this point, since that doesn't really matter, I don't really care where they are. I mean, maybe it does matter, but it just feels like duplication of logic. I might just make it a list and just loop through them. But hey, whatever, it doesn't matter. You're already doing the whole.
I was thinking we already
might as
have
well.
the indexes right here. We just
Yeah.
kind of map them 1-to-1. I don't know.
I likes it. Do it. Looking good. So now you just populate the. Yep.
Yeah, make it that with gameboard.columns, gameboard.rows, and then we just set that, right?
Yeah.
So that gives us all of the cubes, and then we can add a refresh. Or I really feel like we should just get a callback when something changes on the game board. I don't know. Well, let's just do a refresh. This is really like the draw. So just loop through.
I mean, I would say you've got a pretty solid boundary as it is. The game board doesn't really know about, the game cubes or the game view. So, you're good.
I still think that I would have had some intermediary. I find that the view is a visual representation of your data model, and your data object is is the board itself. It seems to me that we're now deciding what renders in the view relative to the data in the model. Mm-hmm. That we're basically leaning into, because this is event driven as opposed to an update loop. We've basically got our own little MVC model here. Now, normally, I think we've all ranted before how you don't really want to use MVC in Unity as a given because it's not really what it's built for. But MVC is built around event-driven architecture, and this is pretty much what we're doing. We have a model which consists of a bunch of data fields, and we have a view that's how we're drawing it. It strikes me if we're making decisions about when things should clear or refresh, there should be something like a board controller, which would take in a view, take in a board, and then draw that board to that view. And that way the controller can decide what logic applies, and we can swap out the view relative to keeping the same board and controller.
Yes, yeah, I like that approach too, because right now we are pretty much we're going all in on the whole cube thing, as opposed to making it something that we could swap out later with a different representation.
There's a reason for that though, because we're never going to swap it out.
There is that. Yeah,
if we're being realistic,
yeah,
we could definitely engineer the hell out of it, but we're never going to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll concede. The game board view is our universal, our game board renderer, I guess, is it encompasses the whole process.
Yeah, I think if we were looking at something bigger, more complex, where we actually had a use case for swapping it out, it would make sense.
I mean, we're doing something simple. Oh man, I love over engineering.
I'm gonna get done. So I was thinking here, instead of a fill and clear, we should just have this be like a toggle state. So you can just pass in a true or false, and then we can pass in the bool from the game cube. Make this like a toggle, like that, and we just do like if it's on, we do the fill color, otherwise the initial color. We can swap this down, make this nice and tiny too.
Well, if this is the angle we're going, then I think Jason was right when he was saying maybe it's a good idea for us to perform actions on the board like clear, and that dispatches an event that the view can look at and then perform the clear as well. So maybe we just have some board changed event, and then the view would just subscribe and perform changes relative to the data change.
Just lean in on it.
I was thinking the same thing. The only issue I wasn't sure on was, yeah, actually, no, that makes sense. Because initially I was thinking there was going to be controlling things from the view, but I think that, yeah, what you're saying there makes sense. So the idea is just that on the game board, we send some sort of an update or an event whenever a thing changes, right? Like whenever the state of a thing changes. So let's see. Let's make the game cube do this. So game cube. This is the problem. Let's see. Okay. Well, we can get the position of it. So let's do that. We'll get the column in position and then set it on the game board.
Mm-hmm.
Dot set, or let's say toggle, and we give it game cube dot column comma game cube dot row, comma true. Is there ever a case when we set something to false on here? No. So just do fill. Because the only other time is we reset, right? No, we can undo. If we release, or if we go back over things. it undoes. So let's do toggle. So make a toggle method here. Yeah. And then we just set positions at that thing equal to on, and then we fire off an event. So this is the fun part. So like a public event action int comma bool. Position changed. Or I don't know. What do you want to name it? Does it seem right to you guys? I was thinking this would be column, row, state. We just register for that on the view.
I usually go with the standard event syntax of naming it an action verb, and then you'd have your internal, say, changed, and then on changed would be the internal.
On cube changed.
Well, I would have changed be the event you subscribe to, and then I would have a protected on changed function inside of this class that we call wherever we need to fire a changed event.
Because the game board is the thing that changed in the end of the day, so I think you're safe to just call that like.
Yeah, because you're literally saying board.changed, and that's the thing you're subscribing to, so it's kind of baked into the name.
Change,
got it.
Invoke.
More like this, but you just wrap them in a method.
Yeah, because well, I guess it's not as relevant these days, but it was mostly to do with the risk of not locking. So you'd need to have you need to cache your event just prior to invoking it. Oh,
I see what you're saying. Okay, so if we make the event here, we fire it off there. And then here, I guess in reset board, we just do a loop through all of them. Where's that little loop? Really don't like copying that, but really what we got to do is just go toggle. Get rid of those, and that should just turn them all off and fire off the event for all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we got a reset, we've got a toggle, and then in the game board view, when we draw, we're really binding. So just because we're going to register an event, I'm going to rename it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go like if game board is not equal to null, we need to deregister. So do game board dot changed minus equals handle game board changed, and we'll generate the method for it. And the reason for that is because right after this, we want to do game board dot changed plus equals handle game board change. So we just want to remove the registration if we change boards, so that the old board isn't still linked. And then this is column, row, and on. Okay. So we're almost there. So we do handle game board changed.
So here's where you call your GameCube.fill.
Yes. Cubes.column, comma, row, dot toggle on. Is that it? Then we don't need a refresh, right?
Well, you might, because you have that reset in your game board, you might have an event.
That's just going to call this anyway, though. I mean, we could optimize it so it doesn't fire off an event for each one, but I don't think I care at this point.
Is it firing on game
board?
board?
Well, I mean, it's going to fire off the event when we do a reset, but that's...
I understand, because you're gonna roll through each one and hit toggle on each one. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, like if it was something we were doing common, like often in an update or more than a dozen of them, maybe I'd care. But I think here it'll be okay. Are we missing anything to make this work? I should be able to draw now and release and see what errors we get. Let's see.
I like that.
There's got to be something missing. There's
errors.
There's never a case where I just coded it all and I didn't miss some line of code somewhere. At least it's rarely a case, unless I'm writing tests and running the tests first. Okay, so there we go. I can draw if I release.
Magic.
Look at that. It's beautiful. It actually works.
One of the questions I saw there was null checking every frame. Is there much overhead to worry about? Not really. It doesn't really affect you that much. As you start to get to more advanced stuff, you might want to favor a null object pattern in certain cases, where you can strip out some of the null checks, or if you use defensive programming, as Charles mentioned earlier, you try to exit out earlier. So what you can do is, you still have to do the null checks, but what you can do is you can structure your null checks such that it does the cheapest one first, and it ignores the others, so it doesn't have to do it. If you incorrectly structure them, you can end up with a case where it does 3 failed checks before it moves on. So there's a couple of things you can do to optimize it, but fundamentally, not really. Like, you don't really have to worry about null unless you're doing like 50 null checks in an update for no reason, and in which case you can probably find a way to wrap that in some other object and then have a single null check that equates to the same thing. So it's usually not an issue.
And even then, you're not going to notice.
Yeah, like you could have hundreds of thousands of them, and it's still, because realistically, right? People don't notice this, but if you do the whole F12 thing and dig down across all the different layers that are inbuilt into Unity, and even in just standard C#, if you're looking at things like how strings are validated, or how any of the toString functions, or all of those sort of number formatting functions, if you F12 down through them, you'll see there's an awful lot of null checks that are going on that you don't even think about. There's already layers upon layers of null checking that's just existing. So yeah, it's just the nature of how code works, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's not slow though. That's the main thing. Like, if you're worried about it for performance, don't. In fact, I'd say generally, if you're worried about things for performance, profile, because usually when people guess what the problem is, they're wrong. It's very, very rare that people guess the right problem. Even people who've been debugging and doing performance optimizations for a long time, like, guess stuff wrong all the time. Like, and if you haven't done it a lot, you're almost, I would say, guaranteed to be guessing at the wrong things and fixing the wrong issues. Profiler will tell you exactly where the problem is, what line it is, how much time it's taking, and how to, get a good idea of how to fix it.
And another way to put it as well is the cost of throwing a null, no matter how bad it is, it will never be as bad as a null firing in your update consistently in an update frame. So realistically, it's not even worth the question of should I avoid null checks. It's more a case of you put the null checks in, providing it makes sense for your code. And, it's always better than the alternative, because if you do any kind of, because people don't realize what an exception is. An exception is full on breaking the flow of execution. It's not just a wrong path. It is completely breaking how the code is running. So you really want to avoid actually throwing exceptions far more than you should care about any kind of null checks.
Totally agree. Somebody asked about releasing the video. It'll be up after this. They automatically go up, and then we'll do an edited version later. And then somebody was asking about the array. I don't know if either you guys want to explain it. The double array or the jagged array.
Oh, the multi-dimensional.
They're multi-dimensional. Yeah. So allowing us to have.
I could take a Charles. I don't mind.
All right, go for it.
Go for it. Yeah.
Right. So when people think of an array is just a fancy word for a list, right? In sort of programming terms, there's various reasons as to why it's an array as opposed to a list, but that's not really relevant. The important thing to remember is it's just synchronous data. It's just A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all it is. And so when people start talking about multi-dimensional arrays, that is just two dimensions. And it's the same way we have 2D versus 3D. It's just an extra dimension. So another way to put it is you have A, B, C, D, or A, B, C, D, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So a 2-dimensional array lets you work on 2 axes. So it lets you have things. It's perfectly designed for working with grids because it's literally displaying data in 2 different sets. And you can keep adding them. You can have multi-dimensional arrays that are mostly infinite. But if you're going past 3, you're probably in dangerous territory and shouldn't be doing it. But up to 3-dimensional is probably about okay. And the reason we do it that way is because at the core of how it works, a 2-dimensional array is just an array of arrays. So put another way, a list of lists. So it's a list of 10 elements, and each element is another list. But the problem is, if you do that, you've got a number of issues. For example, each list can be different sizes relative to the other list. So you could have a list with it staggered. And that's going to be really difficult when doing a lot of complicated stuff to do with array indexes. In most cases, when you're doing 2D arrays, you're doing them for a grid. So long story short, a multi-dimensional array lets you define a list of lists whereby you set a size on both axes. And that way you can work with it quite easily, and it saves a lot of hassle. So that's the TLDR.
It's a good explanation. Yeah, usually when I see them used, it's for things like 2D grids or 3D grids. It's where we usually use them most of the time, because things where you always want the same X and Y or X and Y and Z. And I don't think I've ever seen one that went above 3, like you were mentioning.
And that's the other thing too. Someone made a good point. The interesting thing about arrays too is that the way arrays work is kind of clever insofar as there's actually a really simple equation. It's just a very simple math equation that converts a single array into a 2D array. And it's basically just taking the iterative size of each chunk and dividing it out. And you can effectively turn a single array into a 2D array in terms of just having the right index counts. So it's more efficient to store memory contiguously in a chunk together. So a lot of the times what happens is a 2D array is actually in memory just a chunk of sequential data, but there's a special way in which you ask that data how to get an index out from 2 indexes. So it's kind of like some of the other code you would have seen, which is sort of divide by the width of number of elements and get the one at this index. It's not that complicated. It is a little bit hard to explain without visual aid, but effectively it comes down to it's more efficient in memory to store a single contiguous chunk. And the difference between literally making an array of arrays, like we did at the very beginning, we were confused about the double boxes, versus an actual multi-dimensional array, is it'll store it contiguously as one chunk. So it's far more efficient, even though it's technically, from a using standpoint, exactly the same thing.
That's a great explanation. Somebody asked what we were building. We're just building this level game, or this line thing. We'll get back to that in just a minute too. But it's basically this, where you fill it in and you can, beat the level. And we've got that kind of done. Well, we don't have the part where you can beat it done yet, so we'll have to do that next. And then I think there were a couple other questions too. Let's see. Oh, somebody asked about the mastery course. Is it for beginners? Kind of. It starts off beginner friendly, but it gets into more advanced stuff. So if you're beginner, it's an okay place to start, I think. I got an architecture course that's definitely not. That's coming out soon. But if you're looking to start, it's a good place for beginners. If it doesn't work, let me know. Or if it doesn't work for you, well, let me know. But I think it should be good. And somebody asked about DoTween. I used to use DoTween all the time when I first started using Unity. I don't know about you guys. Did you guys?
Yeah, I've used it.
I relied on it heavily, and then I found that I stopped using it. Like,
I'm a dummy. I used to call it .tween.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you remember Hot Tween? That's what it used to be before all of that.
Yes, I do remember Hot Tween. Or Ho Tween. I don't know what it is.
I don't know. I don't use it anymore, but I used to use it a lot for moving things around. Now I tend to use animations or very specific code for things. What about you, Jason? You still use DoTween?
Oh yeah, all the time. It's like, honestly, it makes its way into about, I'd say, 3/4 of my project, because a lot of the work I do is sort of prototype vertical slice stuff for clients. So there's a lot of sort of swishy animations and stuff that goes into that. And
that makes sense.
We do have
you use it with Doozy too, right?
I do, although I don't like what they've done with the redesign, so I've stopped using Doozy these days. I found a different framework I use instead. They've gone sort of for a what you see is what you get visual editor, and it just seems like a lot of overhead for what amounts to, you know, managing the state of a few panels. But on for the tweening thing. So for people who don't know, tweening is just a kind of a more animated term for interpolation. And so you've got linear interpolation, which is sort of moving a thing from one position to another over time. And so the idea being, if you've got a number at 2 and a number at 4, at time 0.5, halfway between one to the other, it'll be in the middle. So effectively, tweening is just one way to animate things. And it literally is just a case of adding a percentage of a value to the other value until it reaches the end. So it's not that complicated. In fact, I have a blog post on that very topic, which I'll link in a second. And so the reason we're questioning is, do we use this? Well, you can do the same thing with animations. An animation is a timeline. That's the difference. An animation is sort of, it runs an entire sequence of things, and you can stack things up at their positions in time. While tweening libraries are just third-party libraries that do the same kind of thing, but are sort of designed for smaller scope. They don't sort of encompass the whole project. I personally like to use tweening libraries because they handle, there's something you can program easier than animation. Animation is great if you're doing cutscene stuff or you're actually animating a character with multiple blending. But if you're just saying bouncing, sliding an object in the screen, tweening is easier. If you're comfortable with programming, of course. It's obviously easier to animate it if you're happier in Unity. But more so than that, the advantage it has is as I mentioned in the chat earlier, is if you use animations on UI components in Unity, you are forcing a refresh constantly. So in the entire life cycle of that object, even when it's idle, the way animators work is they're constantly pinging their position in time because they're doing it across all of the different items. So if you've got an idle animator in an idle state where something is positioned at 0, it's still animating. Even if you don't see it, it's just animating all of the time to the position of 0. If you do a tween, it's event-based. So it only fires the time you use it, which can be more efficient. It's not, again, it's like the whole if null thing. It's not that big of a deal. It's not going to end your project, but if you've got a giant hierarchy and as your project grows, you might hit a slow down later and you'll question why it's happening. And it could be because you've got a big animation running at the top of your hierarchy route for a canvas, depending on how you've designed it. Yeah, so long story short again, tweening's great. I use tweening a lot. Do tween's my personal favorite. iTween is great, although the syntax uses a hash map, which can be confusing for people. So I usually recommend do tween.
Nice. Yeah, I just, like I said, I used it a ton at the beginning, and then I stopped running into cases where it was as useful. And I'd run into random problems importing it into different projects and stuff. So it's interesting to know how much more you use it, though.
Yeah, and in fact, there's even when I don't want to use external libraries, because that happens too. Sometimes you have a project where you're handing it off to somebody else, or you don't have people have to rely on a bunch of libraries. You can actually find single file tweening libraries. There's a really nice one somewhere. I don't know where I have it. I have the accredited to as well on the top of it. It's someone has just basically taken 800 lines of code and just squashed the common tweening functions into one file. And it's just a really nice way of just basically saying ease in, ease out, use the fundamentals of bounce in and bounce out. And it's all just one file. You can drop into a project and you don't have to add any assets. So
nice.
It's very handy for that. I'll send you a link to that after.
Yeah, you get the link. Go drop it on the description.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I want to fix the next issue in this thing. So when we left off, like we can draw a level and it fills in and stuff, but there's still some things that we can do we shouldn't be able to do. Like it can go back here and then come back down and draw and fill things in. Like we need to only be able to fill in the adjacent squares. So I figured that would be like a next fun, easy thing to do. Right? We just do it. So to do that, I guess my thought was in this try move to new cube. It's called try because like it should fail sometimes. Do we just do a check here to see if this game cube is valid? So once we've raycasted and figured out the cube, just check to see if that cube is valid, is a valid option with the game board, right? So you say like game board dot is valid, or do like some validation checker that just checks to see if the point is valid.
Yeah, I mean, on the game board itself, that'd be pretty easy because you just check if it's already true, then you obviously it's not valid. But another thing to consider is what valid also needs to take into account the previous cube. So I don't know if that's a job for the game board though. I mean, I think the game board does need to tell you if it's valid based on the whole true or false, but it seems like the game controller is the one who can decide.
It should do it. Yeah.
I mean, maybe the game board has information about how this game is played. It is called a game board, but I feel like the game controller should be in charge of saying, hey, look, based on I'm keeping track of the last cube you touched. So based on that last cube, I can tell you whether or not this next one is actually valid.
That makes sense. So to do that, we would just check.
I'm thinking that the game controller should keep track of the previous cube at all times.
Oh, the previous cube or the previous position?
Whatever the previous one that was lit up, because then it would know. I mean, I almost feel like because I was actually playing it in the browser and it looks like it keeps track of the whole line. So maybe you need to have like a stack.
What would it use the line for though?
Well, I noticed that when you go over, like if you're playing the game, when you start going over the multiple cubes, when you go back over them, it unfills them.
Yeah,
you're
basically saying it's got a command pattern. I saw that myself. It sort of has an undo redo relative. Like if you moved one direction and go back, it won't let you move until you've undone the reverse of what you've done by moving back through the steps.
That's a good
I mean, I don't
point.
think we need. I don't know if we need to implement that. That seems like an extra feature from the original requirement, but we could. Yeah, the idea being that for each move you make, we store a stacked position of each of those, and then as you move, if it's an invalid new position, we just unpop the previous stack if you're moving back onto it. I mean, we could do that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to go that ham. We could just keep. I still think we need to keep track of the current cube, I guess, because you figure.
I don't think there's any harm in just keeping track of all of them.
No.
It's not going to get more complicated, right?
Yeah.
Well,
The only thing I don't like about it is that I got a reference to GameCube is in here. But I don't think it matters. What's missing? Oh,
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
yeah, just because it's referencing the object that we're really using for the view, but I think it's okay. The other option would be like make a struct or an int positions or something, but I just keep the cubes here.
Well, I mean, the game board itself could keep track of the order, like the positions that were filled in what order. Because you figure, look, the game board gets filled, and we change its state. So technically, internally, it could keep track of the order in which its state was changed. Again, I'm probably over engineering on this.
In the game board, yeah.
That's like
Interesting.
But well, let's not overcomplicate it. I guess the easiest thing to check is, hey, can I refill the same one, or whatever?
Or can I fill this next one? I guess.
Can I fill this next one? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that for now.
Let's start with that. I don't want to go to.
So we need a current column. Wait, we have these on somewhere else, right? Weren't they in the wrong spot before on the game board? Current row and column, yeah. And we're talking about moving them to the game controller here, and these could probably be private. I can't think of a reason they would be exposed. So when we set the cube, oh wait, is valid cube.
By the way, you got like a super chat.
Oh,
super cat question.
Wait, let's check that out. In future videos, can you show us when it might be useful to use assert function in our code? Heard it's a great example of defensive coding. Yeah, I rarely use asserts in actual game code because it's just going to kill the thing. It's going to shut it down or throw an exception. Like you're going to end execution. I use them in the unit tests instead. But I see what you're saying. I used to see that a lot in a lot of C++ games where if things went really, really bad on the server, like it would be bad, so it would just kill the whole process. But I almost never use asserts in actual game code anymore. I don't. Do you guys ever?
I mean, like you said, I only use them in unit tests. But I know that the Unity engine has an assertions library that I haven't really used it.
Yeah, I used to use it in Unreal, and we'd basically use it to kill the server if something went terribly wrong.
Well, I'm actually on the documentation here, and it seems like I don't know. I don't know if there's some sort of built-in functionality with Unity where if you use their assertion library, it'll do something special that, like, because I see here it says an assertion exception will be thrown in order to pause the execution and invoke the debugger. So I don't know if that's a way, a Unity specific way to be like, hey, look, I'm not going to kill the program, but if you're debugging inside of Unity, it'll pause it there. Like maybe it does something like that. That I'm not really sure though. I'm not 100%.
Yeah, no, me neither. Because my history came from C# sort of line of business software as opposed to games. The assert is used there almost exclusively inside of tests, the same as Jason was saying, because it does. It basically breaks execution. But here's a little bit of story time relative to this idea. If we're talking about defensive programming, basically there's a bit of a war on the concept of exception handling. So as people who are catching up with the latest versions of C# and stuff, there's a major push now to have your code work in such a way where you have to define which variables are nullable. Long story short, it's going to make it so that you can't have things which aren't null, like even your strings can't be null. And everything has to have a value unless you define specifically that it can be null. And the reason they're doing this is because this is the latest take on the idea of nulls break code. Nulls fundamentally are They're not even a bad object. They are the active missing portion of something that's being ferried through your application. They are a problem where somebody will have to handle it. Either you're handling it at one place or you're just passing the null down the chain until somebody handles it. Null, by definition, is a mistake. It is a thing in your code which is not there that it should have been there. And there's been a whole load of different ways to handle this. The old way from Java is to use try-catch blocks. It's you basically the giant try-catch block, and you say if this breaks, catch it, dump it into an exception handler, and then run a specific piece of code to handle when this happens. The next step up from that is the idea of people saying code defensively. Don't let your code ever run in an invalid state. And that basically says the first guy who gets a null handles the null and cuts it off there. And what you do is you decide, is this null game breaking, or can I recover from it? If I can recover from it, I run as if there was no null and I keep going. If it's game breaking, cancel my app and break it from there. That way I can go out. That way you don't end up with data in inconsistent state. Like you don't want someone's user account missing an email or missing an account balance or something, because that's fundamentally going to break your application. After that, there was this whole phase in the middle, which people may have forgotten. And it was this idea of called code contracts, or design by contract. And it's where it's the same as we've done here. If this is null or if this is false, break out of the application. Code contracts were a way of saying, this code will need this data to look like this before you even continue. And it's a more formalized version, but it failed to take off because it takes 4 or 5 lines of code to define what is effectively this should be null or this cannot be null. And it's a horrible mess of code to write that really ruins the kind of readability of your code. So that brings us all the way to today, and how we're handling it is, well, let's not write null logic at all. Let's try to avoid it. And the way you avoid it is one of 2 main ways. You either make placeholders where null might have been, and that's where the null object pattern is worth looking into. It's basically make a version of the thing that you want that has 0 implementation. And you also notice that JSON does something similar. At least I think it's you who does it, who writes your events where you assign a default delegate to your events beforehand.
Yeah, I used to do that all the time. Now I use the question mark dot instead.
Yeah,
I just never invoke without it.
Exactly, and it boils down to the same reason, which is you don't want to be dealing with null throughout your code. If you can find a way to assign even a default value to something, it's better than having a null value. Because again, null value is broken. It's not just a lack of a value. And so that's where we are now. We're basically dealing with how do we get rid of nulls in our code, and we're coming down to the fact that let's just not have nulls at all. That's sort of the general consensus, and people are moving in that direction. So it's a messy topic in terms of how do you handle nulls in code in general.
It's interesting though, because I use nullable primitives all the time now. Like it's especially for data that is optional. I have lots of optional data in some stuff, and use nullable primitives for a ton of things there. In the case where it could have this thing, it could not. It's 100% optional. Yeah. And they're mapping to a database, of course, too, where they're nullable. So,
I use a lot for binding from models from a web API. Like if you're calling an API service and you're getting back a JSON object, you're going to need nullable objects to represent those. And as a small aside, if anyone's familiar with JavaScript as well as C#, it's the name for that is actually an option. There's another design pattern specifically more familiar in JavaScript called the option pattern, and that's the same thing as the nullable object in C#. It's basically a thing it's like a container of one element, and it either has an element in it or it doesn't. So instead of passing a null around your code, you say it's an object that's either empty or it's a list with one item in it. And it's a much cleaner way of using your code because then nothing ever breaks. It's just a empty list. So it's a bit weird syntactically, but it fundamentally is a much nicer way to handle it than letting a null propagate through your code.
So I think this might be all we need. I was just looking at the code. I don't know if you guys have been watching the code. All I did was add the isValid cube thing here, add a get that just wraps those positions. It's just pulling back the positions. And if the state is true, so it's already on, we should return false. The other thing we need to check is that the distance from the current cube to that cube is just 1 unit, right?
Right.
And we could do that with just the columns and rows. So, well, here, first, let's see. So if we set a valid cube, we'll toggle it, and we'll set the current cube, current column to column, and the current row to the game cubes row. And then here, we can just check if Let's see, how do we check? How do you guys want to check this?
So at this point,
We just need to check that the column is one different and the row is the same, or the row is the same and the column is one different. That's really all we have to check, right?
it's or like, oh yeah.
Yeah, so it's either the column equals our current column
Yeah.
and row changed by 1, then we return true. Right. And then also if the row stays the same and the column changes by 1. So we just do like
You can just do current column, take the absolute value of the current column minus the column. And make sure that's equal to 1.
it'd be the absolute value of this, right?
Uh-huh. And then just make sure that that equals 1. Or
Or the other way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we even need the absolute? So we
Well,
could
if
just
you're
do that.
I guess it depends on if if you're going up or down or left or right.
Like that. That's right? So this would be up and down. That's where unit tests come in handy. And then we change this to row, row.
Hey, Mateo's here.
Does that look right? And obviously not the cleanest, but if our column has stayed the same and our row has changed by 1 or -1, I guess that the math dot absolute would have done that, huh? I don't know.
I don't want to be the one to say it.
No, it's good because sometimes we just get it in your head and get confused.
I got you.
Like
it's easier when you're not writing the code.
Yeah. So there. Math dot absolute, by the way, just turns -1 into 1. So if we get -1 or 1, we'll get it. Absolute is just the positive version of the value. I think that's it. So that should tell us if the cube is valid and only let us go to new cubes. So now when we do the selection, we get the cube, check if it's valid, and then only toggle it on and only set our new row if that's the case. And our current column and row, here's the problem, right? That's going to start off as 0. Does that mean we can only start on block 0, 0? Here, let me fuck around and show you how I use my nullables.
Oh boy!
If anybody wants to see how to do it with nullables, do like this. You do dot value and dot value.
Make sure it has a value.
And then here you just check to see if that has value is false, or current column dot has value is false. Return true because they're all valid.
Here's me over. You might want to put a exclamation point in front of that after the or.
Where?
If not, current volume has value. Because you put a
yeah.
Or equal false.
Double equals false. I only put the double equals false there just because I find like when I'm doing videos, it's super easy for people to miss the
it's
not
fair.
Simple there. Like I found people miss it all the time, and then like if I just do double equals false, very obvious when they're copying stuff and looking at it.
And just as a fun side note, because a lot of people don't realize this, here's something if you didn't know, it's pretty cool. The way Boolean operands work. So on line 67 there, what the compiler is going to do is it's going to say if this value is false, and if it is false, it's just going to move on. It's going to return true. It will never actually check the second one. The double pipe symbol will only ever check the first one until it fails the validation or succeeds it and then moves on. If that was a single pipe, it would ensure to validate both claims. That's not very relevant in most cases, but if you're just as a pro tip for people who get confused about it, because this does happen, this is fine because they're fields. They're fields that you're checking. But if you've got a function that returns true or false, and you've got it in an if statement, and you've got if this or this or this or this, it'll only ever run the first one. It won't actually run the others unless they are single pipes instead of double pipes. Just something to keep in mind. It comes up very rarely, but it's very worth knowing.
Yeah, and I would say in general, if your function is doing anything other than just returning back true or false, it's probably shouldn't be in an if statement.
Yeah,
It
100%.
tends to be, because the problem is people don't expect that, right? Like they look at the code, they expect this thing that's in an if statement to not be running and executing things. And by default, you just assume that it's checking. I've run into that many times. It's pain. Like, but yeah, here it's just, it really, this should never get called. Like there's no situation where our code is running where this should get called, but it's good to have as a check in case the code changes. Let me see if
the main
this.
sort of term for that is side effects. So the idea being that when you read your code, what you see, it should do exactly that. As we were saying, is if the code did something else, like it was setting a value in the background, that'll be a side effect. It would be an unexpected outcome from running that piece of code. So whenever you're naming stuff and you're having trouble deciding what to name it, if it returns a value, call it get. If it's checking something, call it check. I mean, it may sound obvious, but there's a big difference between calling get and in the background, it's setting some value to something else. That is not a get. It is internally changing the state of your object. So make sure your names represent what it's doing.
I don't use properties. So properties, setters and properties having logic in them that sets things and changes things. Try to avoid those at all costs, like the public properties. Because most of the time, like if you're not familiar with it, you don't remember that one, you're going to think it's just a value that you're setting, not realize that it's calling some code. I mean, I've seen somewhere like you set a variable and it makes a web service request that saves stuff off to the database, and people don't know it and they're setting it in a loop. Right? It's just like, oh yeah, it's like it's one of those things where the default behavior is innocuous and you don't expect the crazy stuff. Oh, we had another super chat too, so let's answer it real quick. Does it matter if we use MP3s or waves in our game? I have some sound effects that are waves and others that are MP3s. Should they all be one format or OGG?
Do what you like. It doesn't really matter. The only one exception is waves will loop well, MP3s will not. There's a little blip at the end sometimes when you're trying to loop and match an MP3. So as a general rule, I tend to use wave whenever I need something that's going to loop. In fact, I use pretty much wave for everything. Although there's no real harm to MP3s. Like it's not, the compressions in Unity are sufficiently good that you'll be fine for both. So that's my take anyway.
Yeah, I usually go with MP3s just for the project size. Unless they're small, short little things, then I use waves too. But I haven't really run into a problem with audio in a very long time in Unity though, since like the 3.x days. But yeah, I would say just MP3s most of the time, or waves if they're small. Like, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Oh, this is working, by the way. So I don't know if you guys saw, it actually did it. It did what we wanted. So I can start here. I can go left. I can go right. Nothing happens. All the way over here, the only spot that'll work is that bottom left corner. And I can draw all the way around and release.
Love it.
Beautiful. Look at that.
That's great.
So I only have like 10 more minutes until I gotta give somebody a tour of the house. So I wanted to wrap up with winning the game real quick. I figured like we could just count the number of blocks that are enabled, and if it's all of them, you win.
Yeah, that's the works.
If it's the count. And I think maybe we want to do an edited version to show how to block off levels, or maybe we do another call next week and just show how to block off cubes and spots on there and stuff. I think that would be a lot of fun too. And it's one of the things that's missing, because right now we can define a board of any size and shape, but we can't put obstacles in there. I think that would be good. And really all we have to do is like turn them to true, or maybe add a new state that's blocked, or just not show a cube there, right? Like that's the easiest thing. Just don't render a cube. In fact, I think that's probably the easiest thing. Just make a mask that blocks and have it not render cubes in those spots. Because then we don't have to change code at all.
Something that might be nice would be to reuse the grid style code and create a simple generator where you just have a text file with zeros and ones in a 2D array and then spit out different maps. That might be a quick addition.
I think that would be cool. And even just having like an in-game editor where you can just click around.
Oh yeah,
it's like a collab video.
That could be fun. Yeah, maybe we can do that next week. That might be fun. Let me see if we can figure that out. We can just do like the editor version of it to take the stuff and then put together an editor where you can actually create maps and save out those levels. If you guys are interested in that and want to see that next week, hit the like button. If it gets to like 200, we'll do that next week.
To answer one of
Sorry.
Yeah, to answer one of the questions in chat too, how do you visualize your event firing? As Charles said, sometimes it can be a bit of a nightmare when you've got like 50 different events firing, and then as Jason added, it could have events firing events and you can get into spiral loops. How do you solve that kind of a problem? Well, the answer is if all of your events need to be logged, you need to have a way to have a single point of entry to capture incoming events. So my personal suggestion is to have something like an event bus. Effectively, it is a class that will manage the event dispatching. So the idea is everybody else talks to him and says, fire event, fire event, fire event. And he then says, oh, I'm firing an event. And then he actually does the firing event. And the beauty of that is that intermediary section, you have a gate for every single event. So you can, a simple version could just simply be to log events as they come in. A more advanced version would be to add multiple different logger types, log the text files or so on. But it's not just logging. It allows you to also say, hang on a second, I'm testing the user. I want all damage events to not fire. So you could put in a filter at that point and stop damage events and maintain the rest of the code while you're running. So having some sort of nexus point where all of your events loop through a single entry point allows you to have a lot more control over the event dispatching of your application. The caveat to all of that is, as we said earlier, don't fill your application with events. Events should be there when you need events. They shouldn't be used universally for every single thing that ever gets called in your code. So when something is important enough to be not in a loop as well, it's something that is event driven, that happens in your code not too frequently and qualifies as an event, then have some sort of event bus that dispatches it. Would be my personal way of approaching the problem.
That's not a bad idea. Have you used some of the existing ones out there for Unity, by the way?
Yeah, there's one. What is it? Oki or something? I forgot the company name. It begins with an O. They've got a really nice one. It's very low footprint.
I know there are a couple out there. It might be interesting to do something on those sometime. Yeah. Just show how to use a couple of them and what the benefits are. Because I think you just gave some really good examples of why you would want to use those too. Just being able to filter, like that's super nice. Being able to have all that extra functionality. So it's putting in a filled cube count in our game board. I'll go to it real quick. It's just an integer. It's going to start off at 0, and then in toggle, if we turn them on, we add 1. So if on is true, we add 1. If on is false, we add -1. So just going to go up and down. And then it is completely filled Boolean here that just returns back whether or not that count matches our cubes and rows. Since we don't have blockers right now, that should give us the thing. And then I think when we're in here, let's see, in our game controller, we can just check to see when we fill a cube, all right, like right here, when we do the filling. Here, let's make this a method. Select it all and refactor extract. Control-Shift-R, by the way. Extract, and we'll pick a new method called like fill cube. And then if the cubes are full, actually, I don't want to do that in here. We'll say like if board, the game board dot is completely filled, you win. I don't know how we win. Scene manager dot load level. Load scene async 0. Or just restart. Which should be really, really weird because we'll fill it all up and then the game will reload. But we could probably play a particle or something. Let's see. Get that. We drag it around and bam, it reloads. And if I can't finish it, okay, it reloads. Yep, cool. Nice. I don't know. Seems like it's working.
Yeah, it looks great.
And just imagine you had a sound generator for every time you select a new grid square. It does a nice little ping sound for each one. That'd be quite nice.
Yeah. And we could do that. So we could, now people are asking about events, like we could add like a sound controller and just make a script like this is the nice thing about events, right? And the reason that they become really, really fun when you figure out how to use them. So we just do like a start and do like, was it a game board? Or where do we set it? We do it in our game controller. We set the board. We could just set it on our sound controller. Let me see, game controller. It's tiny and it's still so we could yeah, we just bind it.
You could just make this a singleton. I know it's the evil anti pattern, but the game controller, there's going to be one game running, right? At least in this implementation. So I wouldn't be opposed in this particular instance for using it.
dare you.
Making it a singleton and just get
Yeah.
But the problem is I want to set this game board every time. Well, let's see. How should we set this? I was thinking now, like maybe it should, like the sound thing should just subscribe on the view. This is where it gets complicated. Because like the sound, I don't know. I don't know if it should know about the game controller at all, or if it should just like bind to updates happening in the view, or if I should just bind the game board to it, and when the thing changes, do something. But I think it feels more like this thing should be looking at the view. I don't know. Kind of curious what you guys think.
I think that sounds like an idea for another stream.
I think if I was the simple version I would do is I would have the sound controller be the singleton. I would have a method just called play sound. I would take in an audio clip. I would use that inside of the game controller, and then later on when I'd go to kind of tidy up the code a little bit and refactor it, I would then make a game controller audio script that it would defer to instead, which would then call the sound designer, and it would decouple the two. But for now, literally just having a singleton sound controller with a single play sound function that takes an audio clip kind of allows you to have the sound system know nothing about the game, but the game know about sound. And I think that's an okay relationship in terms of how our classes connect currently.
That seems good.
Don't forget, make it play one shot because you're going to end up hitting issues if you don't.
What was that?
I say make it play one shot and then pass in the audio clip inside of the play sound function.
Good idea. Okay, so we'll go just like that. We'll make an audio clip and we'll make that. Oops. I didn't do my serialized field, my S field.
Well, I'll be passing in that as an argument in the play sound. So the sound controller can play any sounds, but the game controller chooses a sound and passes it to the sound controller.
Oh, I see. And then I got to change my sounds on there.
Oh, okay. You could also take in a string or some kind of key reference to reference what kind of sound you want.
Well, I'm only going to play one sound. I was just going to play a beep just because we got like 5 minutes to go.
Okay, that's fair, I guess.
play anything because in about 5 minutes I have somebody at my door. So if we went into here and you're saying, I guess we could just do it right here in fill cube when we call it. So less than ideal, but you do like sound controller dot play sound, and we make a field for it. I'll just cache it for now instead of making a singleton, so it matches everything. But that should, here, get rid of all that extra junk. And then we go back over one more time. It should work. We should have some sound and some, oh wait, we don't actually have a sound file though. Beep, let's search for a beep in the asset store. Free beep. Oh, that's right. Is it gonna work? Come on, asset store window.
What the heck? I didn't know you could search.
Yeah, there's this asset store thing in there, and it just finds files, and you can preview the images and stuff. It's really nice. I had problems with it somewhat recently, but it seems like it's back up and working.
Is that new?
I had problems in the beta.
No, that's been there since 5. That's really old.
Wow.
I haven't used it until very recently, though.
To be honest, it was never worth using in the past, I found, because the store was so damn slow that it would take forever to load. Nowadays, they've managed to make it a good bit faster.
Did it pop up somewhere? There we go.
Soldier
Import.
voice.
Uncheck everything.
Military radio.
Beep.wave.
That's pretty
There we
funny.
go. Sweet. All right. So we got our beep. Set up the sound controller. We'll add that beep sound effect to it. And hit play. Let's see. Oh, there's no audio source on my sound controller. Let's add one.
Get you every time.
Okay, now we'll play. Oh, I have to turn off mute audio. Can you guys hear the beeps?
Yep.
Perfect.
Nice.
I guess that's working.
Just again, drives me nuts. Just put that little pitch wobble in. I can't stand whenever someone has a game where they play identical sounds repeatedly over and over again. Just some
Perfect.
level of a pitch wobble.
What? No, it's good. I get it. If Jason's talking about putting in some pitch randomization, we can do that in the sound controller. So you can just do like a audio source dot pitch equals, and you can do like a. We can just add a little bit of variation there, and then we come back in, and it'll sound not exactly the same every time. It's one of those subtle things that you don't notice until you know what you're actually doing. It's one of the reasons Jason points it out all the time.
Oh God.
It's probably too much of a
Maybe a bit too much, yeah.
but you get the idea, all right? You just give it a little variation, and the amount you need to vary depends a lot on the type of sound. Anyway, yeah, if you guys want to see the editor part of this, let me know. I think we'll try to shoot for doing it early next week, or maybe even later this week. I don't know how time works out. Just make sure you hit like and share the video though, so that we know to do it, that people are actually interested in seeing that stuff, how to build out a level editor, and then maybe some level progression and stuff. We can go through the whole process and then turn it also into a nicely edited step-by-step video afterwards. But hopefully you guys are having fun with it. I had fun. I don't know if you guys want to say anything else. Go subscribe to Charles' channel. Jason, did you ever make a YouTube channel yet?
No. People keep telling me I should make some kind of YouTube channel. I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Eventually he'll make
He just
one,
feeds
and then
me
subscribe.
content.
Yeah. Charles has lots of great stuff. Go check out his channel, Infallible Code. It'll be linked in the description.
Yeah, if anybody does have any questions or wants to talk to me about anything, I kind of live in both Discords, so you can catch me. I go by a piece of fruit. So that's me hovering around in both of the Discords.
Cool. Yep. And if you guys have other questions, just drop them in the comments below. Remember, share and like the videos and all that stuff. And I guess we'll see you in a couple days.
Yep, hopefully.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.
Bye.